Is this on? Is this working? I think we are live. All right, this is a total experiment. This is the Captain's Cast #1. Welcome to Swords and Starships. I am Captain Garrett, and this is essentially a test stream. Let's just see how this live streaming thing goes, shall we? All right, so I am playing around with technology. This is all very new to me. It's all very exciting. Very happy to be in front of so many of you. I'm going to treat this as kind of a dress rehearsal, and we'll just see how this goes. Okay. What should we talk about, dear sailors and star knots? There is actually good things happening. There is an amazing win that I want to talk about right off the top, which is Star Trek Picard Season 3. Okay, I had zero intention of ever watching this TV show. You know, it's allow me to take you back, dear sailors and star nuts, to a young ensign coming home from high school, watching Star Trek The Next Generation. Look, let's face it, high school is terrible and everyone hates it. Well, maybe not everyone. I guess the jocks like it, but I did not enjoy high school. It was a terrible time in my life. I did kind of enjoy it towards the end, though. Once you get to the zero F's given stage of both high school and, in my case now, life, you really begin to enjoy things a lot. So I would come home from school and, I'd feel a little bit depressed. But there was a show that came on at around 4 p.m. every single day, and it was perfect. And that was back in the VHS days. So I would actually record the episodes because to actually buy the entire Star Trek The Next Generation series in VHS would have cost me, and I'm not kidding you, I did the calculations, all of the episodes like $2,000 because every cassette was like $20 minimum. So that was back when you could go to Sam Goody and you could buy individual episodes of Star Trek Voyager. Oh man, those were the days, right? So at 4 p.m., Star Trek The Next Generation would come on, and it was like my therapy. Um, don't misunderstand. It's not like I thought of it that way. I really didn't think of it that way. It was just a show I really liked. When I was, a nerdy middle school teenager, I loved the science. I just loved every episode. They were exploring strange anomalies, and there were weird alien species that were coming out of an extra dimensional realm. Everything is realms, and abducting members of the Enterprise. One of the best things about Star Trek is a feeling of familiarity, of like coming home. Like every episode begins with a cold open. This is a feature of Star Trek I've always really enjoyed. Of course, it's in order to get people watching before the first commercial break. But there would always be, usually, sometimes you'd have a really like crazy opening where something bad is happening right off the bat, but usually it would be a very peaceful kind of like you see the ship gliding through space, you hear the typical nice music, and then you're in the corridors, and Data and Counselor Troy are walking down the corridor, and they're having a funny little conversation about something, and then something weird or mysterious might happen that suggests what's going to happen in the rest of the episode, and then you go into the opening. And the end of every episode would give you this little bookend where whatever conflict they had just gone through, Picard's been abducted by the Borg, but they got him back and they saved Earth and everything's better. And there's this little lesson at the end, not a preachy lesson, just a lesson like that the characters have learned through their travels. And it would close with the ship sort of gliding through space again, and the music would just sort of bring it home. So my point is, you felt like you were rejoining these characters that you knew and loved every episode. There was this feeling of familiarity. You'd go through this little adventure, this mystery, this crisis. They would work through it together as a team. And it's just that total package that made Star Trek The Next Generation like something to come home to. And that in and of itself was a great thing. But also, these were characters you could look up to. You know, Picard was my favorite Star Trek character. Of all Star Trek characters, he was my favorite. And that ain't an easy number one to decide, because there's a lot of great characters in Star Trek. But Picard was my favorite because he was a man of like impeccable morality. He was a man who would give amazing he'd give these amazing speeches where he would argue moral points. There's a great episode, The Measure of a Man, I believe it's season 2, where Data's rights as a individual are in question. And Picard is the lawyer who has to argue the case that Data has all the rights of any other sentient being. And it's just a great example of how Picard had this great moral standard. You know, he had this impeccable moral system. Okay, now I need to pause here for a second. Okay, hello in the chat. Tom, ahoy. Ahoy, Squire Tom. Ahoy, Waffle. Greetings. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Let me know if there's any subjects you want me to cover, by the way. If you have any questions or thoughts, I could use a little help. This is my first time. Be gentle. All right, so anyway, so that was the beauty of Picard, is that he had this impeccable... There's another great episode. Okay, let me give you another example. There's this episode where these aliens are bringing this mysterious package aboard the ship, and nobody knows what's in it. It's this giant kind of like... It's like this giant, highly, technological chest, like treasure chest. I don't want to give it away. It's like a sarcophagus, right? What's in it? It's this big cargo container. That's the word I'm looking for. Cargo container. It's like, what's in this thing? And it's this big mystery, and it gets cracked open. I forget someone on the crew. It's been a while since I saw this episode. But basically, it turns out to be a woman who is she's this incredibly beautiful woman who's being delivered to this other alien world as like a diplomatic gesture. She has like an arranged marriage. And supposedly the first man who sees her is like, well, supposedly any man who sees her can't resist her. They're going to fall in love with her. But she's sort of betrothed or something. And Picard accidentally comes in contact with her. And naturally, he starts to feel attracted to her. But the whole thing is, if like he gives into his feelings, and of course she's into Picard, and there's this kind of like romance starting, and it's going to screw up this entire diplomatic endeavor. Like it's going to cause a war or something. And the whole episode is about how Picard basically, because he's such a disciplined, moral man, he completely resists the temptation to start a romantic relationship with her. And at the end of the episode, all the aliens are kind of like in stunned awe that he was able to resist. And the whole point is that he was falling in love with her, and he did want to, return those affections, but he had a duty and he stuck to it. So anyway, I admired Picard because he gave me an example to live up to. He implied the idea of working to become a better man. And I spend every day of my life working to become better than I was yesterday. With mixed results, depending on the day. Fast forward to the modern era. Star Trek Picard Season 1 began... This was back when I was still blue-pilled on the way that entertainment works now. I was still giving these Hollywood assholes the benefit of the doubt all the time, because I would think, because I am a creative and I understand the creative process is not easy. And, I would think, well, watch the show and just see how it goes. And I remember I was nervous about Picard because, Patrick Stewart when he came out on I think it was Comic-Con, or it was a con where they announced it, and he came out on stage and he had this little line that he said that was a red flag. He kind of said, well, especially in these times, we really need hope again. And I thought, these times, well, we know what he means by that. He means 2016, half of the world are bad people times is what he meant by that. So that was a red flag. But be that as it may, I thought maybe the show will be apolitical like the rest of Star Trek, with the exception of Discovery, of course. I don't consider anything from J.J. Abrams on is not real Star Trek. That's just it. The original 5, that is what I like. Star Trek, the original series, Next Gen, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and yes, Enterprise. Prove me wrong. Enterprise is a great series. So I watched the first episode of Picard. He's on his vineyard, and what I liked about that was it suggested the all good things ending of Next Generation, and it seemed like, hey, this is a great... This is honoring essentially where Picard was at the end of the series. They had the episode where he's in the future. He's 20 years in the future where he's working on a vineyard, and Q has him traveling through time. And so it actually felt fitting that, yeah, that future sort of came true in a different way. And I thought that was super cool. And then there was this thing about he was still feeling guilty about Data. But then you start to get like these modern reporters come into his house, and they don't even sound like reporters, but they just start tearing him apart. Then there's this horrific scene in which Soji, who's revealed to be Data's daughter, she gets attacked in her apartment by these ninjas, and there's this violent, awful scene where she's just, all this stupid martial arts stuff. Now, I like martial arts, but come on. When it's just for the sake of having a flashy action scene, it's awful. And then the first episode of Picard ends with he tries to save her life, and she gets in another fight with these Romulan ninjas, and she self-destructs and explodes in a fiery blast in this horrific, awful way. And then the rest of the season is about Picard trying to save her twin sister. What a dark, dismal... Oh, and of course, lest I forget, he goes to Starfleet Command, and he is lectured by this admiral who basically, the famous sheer effing hubris line. And I was still willing to forgive a lot of that, because I thought, well, maybe they're setting up some things, and, he's going out for one last ride, and then it was all downhill from there. Picard Season 1 is everything Star Trek is not. It was everything Picard is not. It was dark. It was dystopian. It was violent and miserable. It totally disregarded the actual ideas of the Federation, of Starfleet itself. And it wasn't even just that it betrayed Star Trek. It was that all the characters were so awful. Perfect example. It makes sense, in theory, for Picard to go hire a team to help him travel the galaxy and solve problems, right? But who does he hire? He hires this guy, Rios, who clearly they wanted to be the main character of the show. They clearly wanted him to be this kind of rogue Han Solo type character. He's got a ship. The ship design was boring as hell. It's basically a big... What would you even call it? It's basically a big cargo bay with nacelles. That's all it is. A big cargo bay. It's dark. There's like this one little... You see it in Picard Season 3 because Rafi's on this ship. It's like this one little design pattern in the back of the ship, in the aft section, if I am to use proper nautical terms. And that's it. It's visually boring. It's dark. It's awful. Rios himself could have been kind of interesting. But who is his crew on the ship? His crew on the ship is EMHs, which is like, oh, that's member berries, right? That's, oh, you remember the EMH from Star Trek Voyager? See, this is real Star Trek. He has an EMH of himself, which is just himself with different accents, and he has 5 of them, and these 5 holograms run the entire ship. right? And so there's a hologram for engineering, there's a hologram for piloting, there's a hologram for, well, I guess the medical care, but they're all Rios. They're all clones of Rios. So what does this do? It robs the other characters on the show of having anything to do on the ship because there's holograms who can do everything. So right there, that's terrible writing. That is terrible writing. You've automatically wrote yourself into a corner because you've created a plot device that undermines your ability to have any character have anything to do. So most of the series, he's got Rafi, who is just awful. She's better in season 3. You have Murder Doctor. She's on the ship. You have, and she hates space and knows nothing about space travel. So she has nothing to do and wouldn't be able to really do anything on the ship anyway. Then you have Ninja Samurai Romulan, who goes around cutting heads off of everyone. And this is Picard's buddy, just as anti-Star Trek as possible. You know, Worf had reasons when he cut off heads, okay? And then you have, who else was on the show? I don't even remember now. Oh, they brought in 7 of 9 in season 1. And at first I was excited. And then it turned out that 7 of 9's plot arc was horrible. Basically, her surrogate son is stuffed in the fridge in a cold open. They show his eyes being torn out and he's being murdered horribly for his Borg parts. And she kills him. And he has basically one speaking line, which is to in agony beg for death. And it was horrific because I loved that character, Icheb, from Star Trek Voyager. So thank you for that. Thank you for butchering a character that I loved for only one reason alone, which is to have a revenge plot for 7. Thank you, Alex Kurtzman. Thanks for the nightmare fuel. And then you have all these characters, but they have nothing to do on the ship. So Picard season 1 spends most of the series finding reasons for people to get their heads chopped off, for the bad guy girl and sister, brother and sister bad guys to, get a little bit Jaime Lannister and Cersei, if you know what I mean. We get to see Hugh. Hugh comes back. Remember the Borg that Picard rescued from the Collective back in The Next Generation? We get to see him murdered for no reason by just, bad guy throws a knife, goes right in his neck. We get to watch him die. That was great. They stole the plot from Mass Effect 3. Well, basically from Mass Effect. They created this idea of, there's a cult that wants to stop all AI because AI will inevitably destroy all of organics, and there is an ancient race of machines that live outside our galaxy who are trying to get back to destroy all life. It's like, wow. But also, they had never watched any of the Voyager or Next Gen episodes that dealt with AI because AI had Robert Meyer Burnett made this point. It's like AI had already been dealt with in Star Trek. And it's not that you couldn't tell news stories, but the point is there was already a canon of moral arguments that had already been negotiated in the story of Star Trek, both with the holographic Doctor on Voyager and with Data in Next Generation, and in other ways too. I want to say, yeah, I guess Deep Space Nine didn't really do much with AI ideas, but there were some here and there. But basically, that idea had already been explored, and they just ignored it. They just didn't know about it, and they just totally disregarded it. And they opted for the most basic, most common cliched AI plot possible. Oh, AI is dystopian; it'll take everything over, and we can't allow it to exist. Okay, well, that's great Star Trek. So I could go on about this for some time, but I won't bore you with more. I will just say this. I was done. I was done with Picard. It was awful. Red Letter Media, they had this great discussion where they talked about how it was like that. Watching Picard was like that movie Stand By Me, where these these kids, they go on this little adventure because they want to see a dead body. And when they actually find it and see it, it kind of changes them in a way they weren't prepared for. And they're never the same after that. And it's not for the better. It's like, it actually turns out to be this traumatic experience. And they said that watching Picard was sort of like that. It was like you're seeing the corpse of Star Trek, and it changes you to see it. Because for the first time in my life ever, I couldn't watch a Next Generation episode and appreciate it after watching Picard season 1 and about 3 episodes of season 2, because I quit after that. And I just couldn't take it anymore. It was like I can't bear the thought that this is where these characters are headed. It's so awful. And, you know, you can do that thing, headcanon, you just disregard it. I'm just going to disregard that plot ever happened, but there's only so much that can do for you, really, because a part of me also has just kind of made my peace with Star Trek. I've made my peace. Star Trek was a thing, you know, in the 90s and the aughts that I enjoyed. And, yeah, I kind of held out hope, you know, for a little while in those decades that it might come back strong. But you know, things end. All good things come to an end. And that is as it should be. Nothing is permanent. I'm okay with saying goodbye to things I once loved and thinking of them fondly once in a while. And that was my attitude about Star Trek for many years. And then Picard and Discovery came along and it was like, oh, thank you for digging this up just to deface it and ruin it for me. Because it you know, before I at least had a fond memory of this thing that was never coming back. And now I have a terrible dystopian nightmare to think of whenever I think of what I used to love about Star Trek. So, yeah, it kind of ruined everything about Star Trek for me. I still watch Deep Space Nine and Voyager pretty frequently. I just put it on because it's like, there just isn't anything like it. There's nothing like it. Sometimes I just want to see good people, you know, solve a problem. Maybe they make bad calls. They get into arguments. Maybe they even almost lose a friendship over something. But at the end of the day, they work on it. They come back around. You know, there's something to be said for just an hour of that once in a while. And I enjoy it. So then I'm watching. I'd sworn off Picard, never watching this again. I don't, and of course they dangle the whole, you know, the whole Next Gen crew's coming back for season 3, and I thought that is a false flag if there's ever been one. That is a trap, baited. You know, that's an offer you can't refuse, right? That is like, we're gonna bring back all of the TNG cast, and it's like, no, you don't get to do this to me. You don't get to dangle that in front of my face, get me to watch it. Maybe the first episode is passable, but then it begins. The destruction of all these characters. They turn them into assholes. They turn them into a dystopian nightmare. You know, they did it to Seven. Seven was this interesting, you know, sort of hyper intellectual, rational character. She was a little bit robotic, but also had this human vulnerability to her that was so interesting. And what do they turn her into? They turn her into this murderous, vengeance, Fenris Ranger who's just vaporizing everyone in sight because of, you know, they killed her son, basically. How boring. You know, it's like, I love a good revenge arc, but that's not Seven. That's not a Seven story. And I didn't want to see that happen to Riker and Geordi and Worf and all of them. It's like, no, I've seen it done to Picard, and I've seen it done to Seven. I don't need to see it done to anyone else. And so, yeah, no chance I was going to watch season 3. Zero. And then I'm watching Critical Drinkers Open Bar stream, and Robert Meyer Burnett's on there. And I had already heard what Robert Meyer Burnett was saying. Like, I'd already heard it. I'd heard, you know, there's credible people who are saying this is a good season. I'm like, don't care. I don't care. Like, no way. But then I actually heard what Robert Meyer Burnett had to say, and he said, he totally convinced me. And I have a video on my channel if you want to check it out, right? And he totally turned me around on it. I can't believe it. But I'm still skeptical. So I have been watching Star Trek Picard. We are 3 episodes into season 3, and I have got to tell you, wow. What an absolute 180. Couple of things. One of the reasons why this is a total turnaround. And as Robert Meyer Burnett, he kind of told this whole story, and this helped a lot. Alex Kurtzman and Akiva Goldsman, who are cancer to Star Trek, to fiction, and to art in general, and are, Robert Meyer Burnett says, I think Alex Kurtz is probably not a bad guy. It's like, well, if you're talking about, is he a nice person in his personal life? Okay, maybe. But he did a very bad thing, which is to absolutely destroy a story that people care about and then abuse and disregard the fans who objected and gaslight them. It's, I don't consider that good behavior. So regardless of whatever other things are going on in his life, that's a bunch of crap. And yeah, they're awful. They're awful people, at least in that one area. That is awful behavior. And I cannot imagine. I just, even if I were a writer and I were put in charge of something I actually didn't care about, like, what's a good example? Okay, let's just say Harry Potter. That's a perfect example, actually, because I don't like Harry Potter. I'm not into it. I don't find totally cool if you like Harry Potter. Nothing against a Harry Potter fan. I understand liking something like Harry Potter. It just ain't my thing, okay? That being said, if for whatever reason there was some odd twist of fate and I was offered this job and it was like, this is your one shot to write a series and it's a Harry Potter series, and it was like, I have to take this job. Right? And now I'm suddenly helming a series about Harry Potter. And I know for a fact I don't like Harry Potter. What would I do? I could tell you exactly what I would do. I would immediately get other writers in the room who did like it. I would immediately get other people who are huge Harry Potter fans who can tell me all about whether I'm in Hufflepuff or Slytherin. I would get them all in a room and I'd say, okay, here's the deal. I'm not super into this, but I want to do something awesome for the fans. So what are the things they like? Like, explain this world to me, help me understand it, right? That's what I would do. And when someone interjected and said, no, Harry would never do that. You can't write a scene like that with Harry Potter because X, Y, and Z, because of this, this and that. He would never speak to a muggle that way. I would listen. I'd be like, okay, right. Okay, so this is, and here's the part in the book, right, that proves it. I would be so down to listen to all that. And my goal would be to put aside how I felt about Harry Potter and to tell an amazing Harry Potter story. And I really would. I would be tempted. I won't deny this. I would be tempted to put my own spin on it. So I sympathize with that. Not spin, right? But like the stories I like to tell are probably not very Harry Potter type stories. So I probably would be tempted to tell a story that veers off of the typical Harry Potter thing. But that's why I would have the Harry Potter fans in the room. And I would certainly be interested in watching Harry Potter-like YouTubers talk about it. I'd certainly want to hear what they had to say. What are the things they like? What are the things that they hope for and expect? And my goal would be to create something they all loved. And maybe it might be just a touch different than what they expected, but so long as it honored the characters, it honored the world, and it told a great story, I'd be happy. And if it turned out that despite my best efforts, I had written something that the fans felt was an absolute betrayal and ruined these characters for them, I'd be horrified. I'd probably go into a spiral of depression for like 6 months because I would feel like, wow, I've just destroyed something that was important to people. And that's something you may not even be able to repair, quite frankly, but I would try. But I would probably feel quite despondent because how would you repair that? But certainly it would be my job. So that's what tells me that Kurtzman and Goldsman aren't really good people, because a good person would have shame or would have remorse for the damage that they had done. They would have remorse for the damage that they had done to something people cared about. Goldsman and Kurtzman are locusts, and they don't have any regard for the damage they've done. They don't care. They are corporate. These people are common in the corporate world. I've met them in my own corporate travels. They are people who blame others for the things that they do wrong. They will play the political game. They'll backstab anyone to get higher up. So they don't care about what the fans think. They don't care what I think, certainly. They don't care. They don't even care that season 3 is a success, I would imagine. I think they might see dollar signs in their eyes and see, ooh, could we maybe just squeeze a little more out of this? I don't know. They'll take no responsibility for their bad writing. Terry Matalas, on the other hand, who has essentially been given de facto showrunner status of this season, does love Star Trek and does care about it, and it shows in the writing. Let me give you one example. The character of Captain Shaw. So in the beginning of Star Trek Picard Season 3, we are introduced to Captain Shaw, and immediately my expectation of this character was he is a plot device character, which is not necessarily a bad thing. He's just a character that's kind of a stepping stone to where we want to get, which is Riker in command of the Titan. That's what we want. We want Riker commanding the Titan. And Shaw is there to be an obstacle, right? And in Discovery, or in Strange New Worlds, or in Picard Season 1 or 2, these types of characters are always the same. They are immediately portrayed as just bad. Just one-dimensional, they are bad people. Something about them is toxic, and you're not supposed to like them. Something about them is just detestable, and they represent whatever stupid moral preaching that they want to do, whatever stupid political preaching they want to do in a given episode. They will create what they think their political enemies are. They will create them as that character, right? So in the case of Shaw, probably it would have been he's a toxically masculine guy who, you know, he doesn't listen to criticism and he doesn't care what anyone thinks. And that basically would have been his whole character. And really, I kind of thought a little bit that's what he was. But the first scene with him, despite me thinking that's probably where it was going, they're having dinner with him, and it was a really cleverly written dialogue. And he basically is just like, you know, your reputation precedes you, gentlemen. And he kind of makes this argument for how he likes to run his ship and how he doesn't want them screwing it up. And he makes this great line where he says, you know, I've run 36 successful missions or something like that. And there's a reason that those missions were successful. And I don't aim to change that formula. And I'm like, see, that's a kind of brilliant, nuanced argument. This is actually good drama when two people are arguing and both are right. And in that case, even though I'm sort of against Shaw in this scene, because obviously I'm rooting for Picard and Riker, he makes a good point. There is a reason for running your ship the way you run it. But then as the episodes progress, he gets more and more complex. Like, even when he's in opposition to the characters, he has, if not reasons we agree with, he has justifiable reasons for why he's doing the things he's doing. And he's turning into a really excellent character because you know what it is? He's competent. If this were Kurtzman Trek, he would be an incompetent boob, and it's like, it would be, the whole point of the show would be, this guy's we got to get rid of this guy. Like, he's a disaster. We have to get rid of him. I imagine how refreshing it is that you can have a character who is in opposition to our heroes and yet still is portrayed as competent, complex, nuanced. He at least has reasons for even his bad decisions, arguably, if he has a bad decision. You know, the argument for why he's making that decision is at least somewhat justifiable. So I've really warmed up to this character. There's some great scenes with him in episode 3 when spoilers for Picard season 1 through 3. So if you haven't seen 1 through 3, there may be some spoilers ahead. But when Shaw turns over command to Riker, it is, you know, it's not like in J.J. Abrams' 2009, where it's like every person just gets incapacitated and they hand over the keys. I mean, essentially, Shaw gets incapacitated, but in a way that is freaking badass. and heroic, and actually kind of illustrates what a real fight is like between these starships. And when he hands over command, his line is just excellent. He's like, you got us into this, you get us out. And it's clear that he's kind of both lecturing Riker, but also recognizing that Riker has the command ability to get them out, and this is who I'm trusting my ship to. And it was just a great, you know what it is? There's this old naval moral tradition. It's sort of like the Hippocratic Oath with doctors, right? Do no harm. It used to be anyway. In the modern world, that seems to be changing, but there was this idea of like doctors should never do any harm. And that has always been an idea in Star Trek as well. Every doctor in Star Trek has operated from that moral principle. Well, there's an old naval moral principle, which is the captain is responsible for everything that happens aboard their ship, regardless of any individual fault for anything, whether or not something was being hidden from the captain. Even if the captain fought a good fight and the ship was lost, the captain still must answer for that. It's like, even if it wasn't the captain's fault the ship went down, they still have to be court-martialed. They still have to face an inquiry and explain themselves. Like, why did your ship go down? And I really quite like that principle. And Kurtzman Trek has none of that. In Kurtzman Trek, captains seem to think that their purpose is to be on a super fun adventure with their friends and talk about their feelings all the time. It's like Star Trek Picard Season 3 is back to the old principle, which is every captain is in that position for a reason. You do not become a Starfleet captain by chance, or you do not become a Starfleet captain by nepotism. Kirk was the original archetype of this. Kirk was the most competent man on the Enterprise, period. The most competent person on the Enterprise. Picard was the most competent person on the Enterprise. Sisko was the most competent person on Deep Space Nine. Janeway, the most competent commander and scientist on Voyager. That is the Starfleet ethic, right? And so if there is a captain who is in that chair, it is for a reason. And what I love about Shaw is that even though he's not the captain we're rooting for, he's really not the captain we want, because we want Riker to be the captain, or perhaps Picard. But yeah, it's really Riker. Riker's the MVP. Still, we understand. Shaw earned his place. He earned that chair, and he deserves it. So here's something kind of cool. Check out this. 100% critic score. I really don't give a shit about what the critics say anymore, but they like it. That's pretty good. Considering it's as non-woke as you could possibly get. So I guess the critics they get to like something that for a change they don't have to pretend to like, which that must be nice for them. 86% though, this is the real score to look at. 86% audience score. The first season of Picard had a 56%, I believe, audience score, and an 80% critic score. That should tell you something. And then season 2 had a 28% audience score and deserved it. It should have been a 0. I mean, a flat 0. Season 2, I've said Star Trek Picard is the worse than Lower Decks, and I mean that. Star Trek Picard is the worst Star Trek series of all time, and season 2 of Picard was the worst season of Star Trek of all time. I mean, it's not, well, I don't want to jinx it. It's nearly impossible to do worse than that. So, Star Trek Discovery is finally ending with season 5. This from Comic Book News. Star Trek Discovery is a perennial favorite on the service, near and dear to the hearts of legions of Star Trek fans, as well as all of us here at Paramount Plus, said Tanya Giles, Chief Programming Officer at Paramount Streaming. I love it. You're not allowed to say anything that goes against the corporate narrative. Why do they even interview these people? Why do they even want their quotes? They're just going to say, they're basically just going to say, it's the best, it's the greatest show of all time. There's never been anything like it. Come on now. So that's good. Thank God that's ending. Let's talk about The Mandalorian. Does anyone like The Mandalorian? I liked The Mandalorian when it came out. Uh, oh, we have a comment from Waffle. Never watched Star Trek, but I like hearing opinions about the show. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Star Trek is one of those things. It is a nerdy thing. Like, it's a super nerdy thing. When I was in school, like, it was, if you were talking Trek with other kids, you knew they were not the athletic types. Let's just be honest. Uh, but what's funny too is like my friends and I were so nerdy. We would talk about all the capabilities of the starships because I will say this. Star Wars. I don't know, Waffle. Are you a Star Wars fan? Let me know if you're a Star Wars fan. But in Star Wars, I think there's less attention on the technical aspects. You kind of just accept that there's Star Destroyers and there's Death Stars and there's, they kind of just exist. They don't really talk about their actual, like, how fast can they travel or what is their actual. They talk a little bit about their armaments, but, like, what does a proton torpedo actually do? You never really know. In Star Trek, it's very much different. It's very technical. They talk a lot about, because a lot of the plots are driven by the technical challenges, they talk a lot about how, like, the actual warp speed, how fast, like, if we can reach the planet at warp 9.5 in 7 hours, but we can only maintain that speed for so long. And so there'll be dramatic, like, chase scenes where it's like the Borg are chasing the ship and they're like, we can't maintain warp 9.9. They're still matching our speeds. We can't maintain this much longer. That's cool stuff. That's where the whole Scotty thing comes from. I've given her all she's got, Captain. That's because there were always these technical limitations. And so Star Trek nerds, we love to talk about that. We're like, well, a Klingon D7 was the pinnacle of Klingon design, but it could never have beat, and so we would get in these conversations. It was a nerdy thing. But I think what's so great about it, actually, Robert Meyer Burnett made this point. He said it's kind of like the Twilight Zone in that it's an anthology show. Every episode is kind of a different story. However, the difference is it's the same characters, going through. And that's a fun part of it. Deep Space Nine and Enterprise kind of departed from that a little bit. Towards the later season of Deep Space Nine, it became a serialized show. So look, if you want to get into Star Trek, I would say no, you could never go wrong with Next Generation, but I would say Deep Space Nine, probably for like non-Trekkies, is probably one of the best ones. But honestly, all of the original 5 are good. So, but yeah, Mandalorian, man. I don't know. So I enjoyed. Here's the thing. I was a little bit blue-pilled, but kind of coming out of it right after Rise of Skywalker because I was kind of a late comer to the Star Wars universe. I wasn't like I was definitely into Trek. I was very much a Trekkie. I was not much of a Star Wars guy until they did that re-release in the late 90s where George Lucas put the original trilogy back in theaters with the added scenes and everything. And I actually went to see him in the theaters. That was the first time I'd ever seen Star Wars in the theaters. And what's this is why I love going to the theater, because in the theater, you fully connect and engage with a film, and you engage with the audience around you. Your attention is on the film. Of course, we didn't have smartphones back then, but that's another factor, is you're not being distracted by other things going on. So you're just watching the film. And that was like the first time I'd ever done that with Star Wars, where I just kind of sat there and just experienced the whole story in a theater environment. And that's what pulled me in. I was like, you know what? This is really cool. I really enjoyed that. And then the prequels came out and mixed results, highs and lows. I remember I loved like Darth Maul and all that stuff in Phantom Menace, but obviously, yeah, Phantom Menace I went and saw it like 4 times, I think. But you got to remember, it was like new Star Wars at the time. There hadn't been new Star Wars since the early 80s. So it was a big deal. It was like, oh, wow. And some of that was, it was the newness of it made it more fun. But yeah, there's definitely boring passages of Phantom Menace, but I was into it. Attack of the Clones, I remember liking. but it has the most confusing plot of any Star Wars movie ever. To this day, I don't understand the cloner Sifo-Dyas thing. I just don't get it. And I know they've explained it in Clone Wars and all that stuff. And I've gone through it. I've literally read fan wikis to try and figure this thing out. And I think I'm like 95% there. So if a plot is so complicated that you can read a wiki page and still not understand it, it's a little, maybe another rewrite, George. But then Revenge of the Sith, I really like Revenge of the Sith. Not perfect. There are a couple, I still think Anakin's turnaround was a little weird in that scene, but definitely but it had like, basically, it was a pretty great story. It was a pretty great kind of prequel to the original series, and so I was into it. And then Clone Wars, despite having a lot of Saturday morning cartoon kind of episodes, had some episodes that were truly great. And I really got into it. There's about 50% of the Clone Wars animated series that's totally unwatchable. Maybe 40% if I'm being generous. And there's about 20% of the Clone Wars animated series that literally is like, this should be nominated for an Emmy. Like, this is an incredible... So just one example. In the Clone Wars, there's this 3-episode arc that focuses only on the clones. And so Anakin and Obi-Wan depart, they're off doing something else in this 3-episode arc. And it's just the clones who become really great characters throughout the series. They actually have names, and they have nuanced personalities. And so we come to like them. And they wind up on this planet, and it's basically like, it's like an allegory to like a Vietnam War or like a World War II meat grinder battle. It's basically like we are on this planet. It's a total battle of attrition. It's this meat grinder, and the clones are dying left and right. And it's really kind of a nightmarish episode. It's like a war movie episode. And it's 3 episodes of this, and they're fighting this, and it's amazing how they were able to make, clones and droids fighting each other seem as compelling almost as like, we were soldiers in the Star Wars universe. I mean, it was damn impressive, and I loved it. And they kind of jumped the shark at the end because they bring in this whole plot about how there's a corrupt Jedi that's leading them, but he basically turns out to be a Sith, which is a little disappointing for me because I kind of liked the idea of a Jedi that was just a bad leader, because that was kind of the idea. They're being led by this Jedi who keeps making bad decisions that's getting them killed, but they can't question the Jedi. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting idea. And then at the end, they just revealed, oh, he's just a Sith, and he's been deliberately. And I was like, that's so boring. I was so interested for a minute there when I thought this is a good Jedi, but he's making bad calls. I thought that was a really cool idea. So Clone Wars had some really epic, great storytelling in it. Then you get, so I had a lot of goodwill going into the sequel trilogy. I loved Force Awakens, I admit. Yeah. Well, look, Force Awakens, all it really did was offer possibilities. It said, oh, here's this character Finn who's broken away from the brainwashing. How did he do that? Ooh, could it be the Force? You don't know. Here's this character Kylo Ren who's struggling between the light and the dark, and so there were possibilities, but there was actually no concrete story. So if you just had those open possibilities, you could kind of enjoy it, because then you could kind of fill in, what are they going to do in the next one? And so I had a lot of goodwill with Force Awakens. I defended the killing of Han Solo. I thought that was I actually, at first, back then, I thought that was a risky choice, and I thought it could work. And I now realize I was totally wrong. That was a totally bad take. I was super wrong about that, and I see now why. Because when I hear like diehard Star Wars fans talk about how we'll never get those 3 reunited, and then I recognize that they ruined Harrison Ford's character. They ruined Han Solo's character because they basically turned him back into what he was before he became a general in the Rebel Army. It's like, once I understood all that, I'm like, you know what, you're right. That was terrible. Still, could have worked out, but then The Last Jedi happened, and that was definitely one of those movies where there were things I liked, but there were things in that movie that were just awful. Everything with Luke was awful, and I And it was weird. I was unsettled by it because part of me liked elements of it, and part of me was like, something is really, really off about this. And I never really cared about the character of Snoke, so that was one of those things where I was like, I don't really care that they killed off Snoke. And all my Star Wars friends were so mad at me about that. And it was like, fair. But I just didn't care about Snoke. He wasn't that interesting to me in The Force Awakens. So killing him off was actually kind of interesting because I was like, oh, cool. Maybe we'll actually have a more interesting villain in the next one. But obviously, that was terrible. They shouldn't have done that. Just, But then, so then after Rise of Skywalker, I recognized this is not a good trilogy. Like this did not work out at all. And Luke is ruined. Luke is totally ruined and will never be a good character again and had a terrible ending. And you ever had a nightmare where like you're running from something or you're trying to get somewhere and you just can't get there? Like you're climbing stairs, but you can never get to the top, or you're trying to get to a door, but it just won't open. It's like, that is what The Last Jedi feels like to me, because what we wanted was to see Luke Skywalker, train Rey just the way Yoda and Obi-Wan had trained him. We wanted to see him prove himself as a wise teacher and help a new Jedi save the galaxy. And then we wanted to see him kick some ass. We wanted to see him come out of retirement and kick some ass. And it was like we were in a nightmare and we were reaching for that. And the movie kept just pulling it away. Like every time we'd get just a little close to it, the movie would pull it a little farther away. And then at the end, we get this amazing moment where we think, finally, we've got it. We finally got it. Luke is facing down the whole First Order, and he's about to give Kylo a real lesson in what a real Jedi Master can do. And then it turns out he's not actually there. He fades away, and then he dies. He dies. It is a nightmare where you never get... It's that nightmare. It's like, oh, you thought you had it, but you didn't. It's that nightmare where you have to tell someone something, but your voice won't work. It's exactly what that movie feels like to me. It's disturbing. It's awful. Rian Johnson, that guy's got, I think, some serious imposter syndrome in life. Like, he's got some weird mental blocks, I think, because I actually think that guy fears success. And you could argue he has a lot of financial success, but I don't think he has real success. I don't think he has success as a creative artist, and he knows it. Deep down, he knows it. And I think it bothers the shit out of him. And I think it's his own self-imposed limitations that keep him from it. Because I will just say, sometimes when I'm writing a story, I'm afraid to let myself write the story I really want to tell. I'm afraid to write the story that actually gives me the payoff I want. And it's a weird thing. I could explain it, but it'd probably just bore you. But I just think he has that. And I think that somewhere deep down, Rian Johnson knew what a good Luke Skywalker story would be. And he himself was in that nightmare where he wouldn't let himself deliver it. I know that's a super weird take, but it's just a speculation on the part of mine. So I liked Mandalorian because it seemed to be restoring the old school Star Wars feelings that made the original series better. It had its problems. I definitely agree that like the first season, it was like 1 or 2 episodes were total filler. Some were like, forgettable. And it was a little bit annoying how slow the main central story was going, but I liked it. I enjoyed that it was just a Western. It was a serial adventure, which was really what Lucas intended Star Wars to mimic. That's the whole reason for the title crawl. It was meant to be kind of like Flash Gordon, which that's kind of what Flash Gordon, roughly was, is like it's a serial adventure. And The Mandalorian was part of that adventure. But I didn't understand that what had happened was because Disney controls everything and they run everything by their stupid algorithms, we can never actually have gritty stories anymore. We can never have real stakes, and everything has to have jokes and all this stuff. And because of that, we're never going to get a different story. We're going to get a safe vanilla story all the time. And I just didn't understand that when I was watching the first 2 seasons of Mando. And it's like now, after all the other just garbage, just what a pipe of sludge Disney Plus has just forced through the system. It's unbelievable. It's like every show is so freaking garbage. And I can't even believe it. I'm like, wow, I've never seen a company so committed to never learning a lesson ever. Like, it's bizarre. And but I thought Mandalorian, they can't lose Mandalorian. So I actually kind of expected the first episode of Mandalorian. I wasn't going to watch it, but I am having this channel as my new project, and I thought I just got to check it out, and I got to do a review on it. And I was like, what if it wins me over? I'm thinking, this show might win me over, and it'll be like Picard. I'll be like, oh, so you know what? Mandalorian's pretty good. And then I'll take all the shit from all the Mandalorian haters who are just be like, oh, you're a Disney shill. And I'm like, oh, whatever. If I like it, I like it. If I'm enjoying it, I'm enjoying it. And I'll give you that honest review. That first episode of Mandalorian, boring as hell. Like, of all the filler episodes of the first two seasons I didn't like, I would pick this one as the most discardable. Like, discard this episode. You don't need it. It's your first episode. Why would you have as your first episode? He has no antagonist. He has no goal. And yeah, you could argue that the pirate he coincidentally runs into is his antagonist. It's really not. That's not really an antagonist for the Mandalorian. That's just stuff happening. That's just, he accidentally involved himself in a peripheral dispute with pirates, and because he killed one or two of them, now they're mad at him. It's like, but that's not interesting. Like, that's not compelling. That's just stuff happening, right? So that's not an antagonist for the Mandalorian. That's an antagonist for Carl Weathers' character, is really what that is, that he got involved in. You know what it is? It's the thing in video games where you have to go get something, but there's something in your way. Like, you have to go to this inn and retrieve this thing, but when you get there, there's like a pirate who's in your way, and you have to fight them. That's what that was. It was like, Mandalorian is on a quest to do something, and we just need to put something in his way. These are, it was so poor. And then the crocodile thing in the first scene, this is all they think that Star Wars fans want? They just want a giant monster that nothing can kill it except a proton torpedo. How convenient that the Mandalorian shows up at exactly the right time. And they think that's interesting. It was boring. I've never seen... You know what? And this makes me think of, like, in The Force Awakens, the fight with what were those spherical alien things that Han Solo was transporting, Rathgars or something. And it was like, they're totally undefeatable. They kill everything in sight. It's like, this is the new thing in Star Wars. We're just going to put monsters in the show. And this Clone Wars did that a lot. I think this actually comes from Clone Wars. That was where that started, is they would have because they needed monsters that the Jedi had trouble fighting, right? And so they would come up with all these monsters that even lightsabers would just bounce off their carapace or whatever. And it annoyed me then, and it annoys me now when I see this. I'm like, come on. At least show the characters being clever. Like, maybe the Mandalorians start drawing the creature. Whatever. I don't even care. All right, let me check out some of these comments, because there's a couple coming in. Tom says, explain it. Explain what now? Tell me what to explain. Waffle says, just remember, they can corrupt future movies, TV shows, but they will never be able to touch the past. Talking as a Lord of the Rings fan, and how Rings of Power was a disaster. You were absolutely right, Waffle. You were absolutely right. I mean, I agree with you in principle, okay? They can't... the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy, which I'm a great fan of, and I realize it's not 100% faithful to the books, and I did not like the Ghost Army at the end of Return of the Kings. That was a Deus Ex Machina that was not in the books. I didn't like that. But they're good, and they will always be good so long as we own physical media they can't edit, because that is the one risk, is that they can, because everything is streaming now, they can start editing these things, and we won't even know it. They can basically, so definitely we need to own physical media, but yes, those will always stand. But here's the thing with Picard, man. Like, I agreed. I would have agreed with you before I saw Star Trek Picard 100%. Now I'm like 95% because I will tell you, like, after season 1 of Picard, I said, forget about. I'll just forget about it. I'll just disregard all of the Kurtzman Trek, and I'll just remember TNG and the movies I liked for what they were, and I'll just pretend the rest didn't happen, and that worked for a while. But it's like the more of this crap that you see, I would go back and I would watch Voyager, and I would see 7 of 9, and I would start thinking about, and I would see Icheb, and then I would think about that awful scene where they're tearing his eyeball out, and I'm like, oh God. And so even just that thing intruding upon my viewing of this old property, it bothers me. It's like a splinter. And so you're right that they can't change those stories as they were. But they can still poison us. They could still poison our consciousness. And that is what I hate. I really think, Andrew Klavan had he's a novelist, Daily Wire commentator. He's a novelist. I love his takes on art. His takes on art are really interesting. Some of them I disagree with, but he had a really good point about how, like, art is it should not just be anything. Like, he thinks Jackson Pollock, for example, is a terrible artist. Jackson Pollock, famous for those paintings where it's basically just paint splattered everywhere. He thinks Jackson Pollock is awful. I know nothing about fine art, but I'm inclined to agree. I've never seen a Jackson Pollock painting I find it intelligent or inspiring or brilliant. And he's like, why? Because what is the goal? What is the goal of this artwork? Like, art is supposed to inspire and uplift, and that doesn't mean it all has to be like happy and positive, because Andrew Klavan writes crime novels. There's lots of dark, so that's not his point. His point is that art has to have a purpose that beautifies life. The purpose of art is to beautify our lives. And the purpose of an artist is really to be a servant of the rest of society who are working more central and more important roles in life. Essentially his point is like being a doctor or, putting up power lines is a more important and valuable profession than writing movies or novels, is Andrew Klavan's point. And I love that. I think that's a great way to look at it. He said, my job as a novelist is to beautify the life of the guy that's working on the power lines, or the construction worker who's building something, or the just any kind of profession that is more central and more necessary to the working of society. He's like, my job is to make their lives more beautiful as an artist. And the minute I heard that, I was like, yes, I agree with that. And I integrated that into my own ethics. So when you create art that makes life more ugly, that is a sin. And I don't mean in the religious sense. I just mean it's a sin it's just awful. Like, why would you do that to your fellow humanity? Why, and look, I know there's people that love horror movies, and that's fine. I'm not saying those things should not exist. I'm a free speech, free expression guy, absolute, no exceptions. So I'm not saying bad art should be suppressed or censored. Don't get me wrong there. I'm just saying the goal of an artist should be to create something that adds to the consciousness. And I actually think horror movies to an extent actually do. I actually think horror movies are great, and I think they're important. They're important to the human psyche because they are a way, it's like Halloween. They are a way for us to express ourselves. So I'm not even saying that you can't have dark or even frightening things in art. From my point of view, I just think when you set out to make a Star Trek show and it's a nightmare, you've taken something away from people. You've polluted the human consciousness, the human psyche, and that's a sin. The first order. So Tom says, Mando shooting grappling hooks into the croc made me laugh. Yeah. Why? It's like, why? Are you gonna restrain the I can't even, how do I even describe the size of this thing if you haven't seen the episode? It's like the size of a skyscraper, this stupid thing. And it's like, oh, we're gonna corral it. They're shooting it with blasters. The blasters do nothing. They do absolutely nothing. And what do? They keep shooting the thing. Just shoot it more. Shoot it a few more times. Blasters are like pea shooters in Star Wars now. Blasters suck. They can't do anything anymore. At least Andor, which was, Andor was overly praised, I think, by a lot of people who liked it, but it was also pretty good. It had some moments that were like really good. And one thing I will say is the blasters were lethal in that show, and I loved it. It's the most lethal blasters I've ever seen. So yeah, but in every other Star Wars property now, it's like, yeah, the blasters are pea shooters. They will kill a human. Well, they'll kill an armored human easily. Like no armored human except for the Beskar armor, whatever, who cares? But like the Stormtrooper armor, it'll go right through that. Why do they wear armor? Why do the Stormtroopers wear armor? I've never understood this. Like the armor's totally ineffective, does nothing. Like it does absolutely nothing. And they've always worn it. And so anyway, Clone Wars did kind of address that a little bit, which was fun. The clones had armor that had some effectiveness, and that was kind of interesting. So I enjoy stuff like that. But yeah, the blasters are weak and lame. Tom says, oh, the part about what holds you back from writing the stories you really want to write. You brought it up talking about Rian Johnson. Okay, well, yeah, I'll explain that a little bit. It's like a mental block, right? All of our limits are self-imposed, I believe. We fear failure and we fear success. And part of writing any fictional work, it's a tightrope, I think, because you can't just write, no disrespect to fan fiction, because there's a lot of great fan fiction, but one of the reasons why fan fiction is generally regarded as not great work is because it is meant to simply gratify the desires of the writer. The writer enjoys, take who wrote the 50 Shades of Grey. I know this is I shouldn't even look it up, but I can never remember her name because I just don't really care about that book. But it is worth E.L. James. Okay, E.L. James wrote 50. So she started out as writing fan fiction for Twilight, and she liked writing erotica about Bella and Edward. And that really became the source material for what became 50 Shades of Grey. And her only goal was to gratify her own, desires to see those characters in this steamy romantic relationship. And it's like, and that's fine. But does that make a good story? I'm not going to comment on 50 Shades of Grey, of course, but I'm just saying this is the purpose of fan fiction. It is to gratify your desires. So as a writer and an artist, you cannot simply gratify everything you want. You cannot let your characters have absolutely everything you want them to have. Because if you did, it would simply be wish fulfillment. This is one of my criticisms of Quentin Tarantino, actually, is Quentin Tarantino does great work, but he also does sloppy work, I think. And he hides it with his style a little bit. Like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Inglourious Bastards are just super overrated. They are super overrated films. I really kind of dislike both of those films overall. There are things in them that I liked, but generally my problem with what he does is a lot of it is so wish fulfillment that it's kind of embarrassing to watch. Like, it's just like, yeah, he just loves the idea of all these actors turning the tables on the Charles Manson attack. It's like, which was fun to watch, I will admit, but is that a good story? I don't know. It's silly. I don't, there's not any part of me that can't not think about the fact that this didn't actually happen this way. So I don't know. So that's my thought when I'm writing something is like, I can't just give in to everything I want. I have to really consider what is the price the character has to pay to get this? What is this story really about? And but it also has it's a double-edged sword, because if you take that too far, you actually start withholding from yourself things that you as a writer find fun. And really, as a writer, you should be having some fun when you're creating a story. You should be writing a story that is fun for you and that you want to read. To a point. Obviously, you have to consider the audience, but you are part of the audience when you're writing a story. And so, I'm working on this science fiction story that I'm writing, which there'll be more on that later. And sometimes I think I'm withholding from myself what I actually want the story to be about. So I don't know how else to describe that. So I just think probably Rian Johnson, maybe in his heart of hearts, he thought, wouldn't it be fun, just speculating here, wouldn't it be fun to just tell a great story about Luke kicking ass and all this stuff? And it's like he deliberately chose every possible opposite choice to a classical story. We will end all hope that this villain is going to continue in the franchise. We'll just disregard the villain. The villain didn't matter. We will undermine all of the questions about Rey's parentage. We'll disregard those, throw them out. We will have the wise master refuse to teach the student, and the student will just simply learn on her own. I mean, he subverted every single classic storytelling principle, and that is a hint to me that he's someone, I think, who is afraid to tell a story that would actually please him, that he would actually enjoy. I think he defines himself by his opposition. Like, that to me is a sign of insecurity, right? As an artist, because the insecurity is my work isn't good enough, and so I have to tell a story that stands out, right? And I think the way people get at that a lot of times is to simply try and be counterculture and just surprise, Here's a good example. Game of Thrones, right? George R.R. Martin, as he has always put it, and I kind of love people explain, people ask him, why do you kill off all your characters? And he always kind of, his explanation I've always enjoyed, which is that he hated it when he was a kid reading books, when he always knew the hero was going to win. The hero could be surrounded by 30 assassins, but we knew the hero wasn't going to die. And he kind of hated that. And so he set out to tell a story where you'd be, as he puts it, afraid to turn the page. And I kind of admire that. Like, that came from a real place. He wanted to tell a story that would please him, right? And a story that would please him is one in which he really was afraid for the hero's fate. And I thought that's a good reason to write that way. And I quite enjoy that. And I think that's partly why Game of Thrones, to an extent, at least at first, was so successful, because it came from a genuine and authentic place, right? Rian Johnson, it's the opposite. Rian Johnson is the type of guy, I think, that sees an artist doing something like that and takes the wrong lesson from it. He sees that and sees all of its great success. Again, this is purely speculation on my part. I don't know if this is actually true. I'm just saying this is what I see, right? He sees something like that and he thinks, that's exciting. People are loving it. It's getting attention because it's subverting the trope that the hero always wins. And that's why it's successful. It's like, no, it's not successful because of that. It's successful because it came from a place of, I want to create this experience, and I want to create a different experience than you're expecting. And it came from an authentic place. Rian Johnson is just subverting for the sake of subverting, because he wants attention, and he wants attention for his work, and his work is crap. And he hasn't put in the effort to tell a story that would maybe actually be traditional and pleasing, that would also be successful. And in his defense, that's a very hard thing to do. I can understand wanting to hide from that. But hey, what do I know? He got paid $100 million to write 3 movies for Netflix, so I mean, I guess he's probably happy. Is he happy? I wonder. Would you be happy $100 million and you ruined... You're the man who destroyed Luke Skywalker. Is he happy? Maybe if he's a psychopath. If he's a psychopath, yeah, he probably doesn't give a shit. He goes on Twitter and he claims he's very happy with The Last Jedi, and he loves to just like stick it to the fans, be like, I'm glad I pissed you off. It's kind of his attitude. No, he's not. I don't believe that, unless he's a psychopath. But I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that he has a soul. I'll give him that. So, somewhere deep down, it bothers him. I think it does, because A, he feels the need to talk about it, so there's something there. He feels the need to defend himself, which is natural but really, if he really was proud of his work, I actually think he'd be more open to hearing people's critiques. I really do. I think if you love what you did and then people shock you by saying this is terrible, I don't know, my reaction to that is, wow, I thought this was great. And well, I have had that experience because my books were edited by a professional editor. And it's amazing how, like, a scene I thought was kind of nothing was like, oh, this scene was amazing. But then, I kind of get the notes on a scene that I thought was brilliant. And it was like, oh, this made me laugh and not in a good way. And it's like, ouch, yikes. But my next reaction was, okay, why? Why did you have that reaction? Or it was just to agree. Like, you know what? You're probably right. I'm going to cut that chapter. But like, generally, it was surprising, and it would make me wonder why I thought this was such a great thing and someone else didn't. So, Rian Johnson must have some curiosity if he cares about it. If he really stands behind his work, he must have curiosity. But he doesn't exhibit any. So I think he knows deep down that it's crap. And that's probably one of the most convoluted trains of reasoning you've ever heard. But there you have it. This is a live stream. This is unedited, unfiltered Captain Garrett. This is the Captain's Cast. Give me more questions, Tom. Yeah, Rings of Power. What else we got to talk about? John Wick. Okay, so I recently watched John Wick again. And I watched the whole trilogy. So first of all, John Wick 1 is a perfect film. It is absolutely perfect film, and it was amazing because it was years before I watched it, like years. And people would always talk about it. I remember thinking the trailers looked dumb and dopey. It was Keanu Reeves saying, "People keep asking if I'm back, and I'm thinking I'm back." And I was like, oh, God. Because there were a lot of dumb action movies at that time that were just... And I just remember thinking it was going to be like all those other dumb action movies, and I just didn't have a real interest in it. And people would keep talking about it, and finally one day I sat down and watched it, and I was like, this is a great movie. It has this amazing emotional core, and it's just a badass assassin revenge story, and there's just a sense of style and consistency to the whole thing throughout. Like, this movie knows exactly what it is. It knows exactly what story it's telling. It's totally original. It's not based, to my knowledge, on an original source material. Is it? I don't think it is. But I'm pretty sure it's not. Anyway, I just liked it. It was original, and it was nothing. And then they come out with the second and third one, and they were pretty good. But I did feel that the problem with the second and third one is they were getting a little bit outlandish. The lore of all of this underworld of assassins was getting to be kind of preposterous to a point. But that being said, the lore is it's very organically developed. It's like the first film establishes a couple of rules, and then they kind of layer onto those. And so the world is sort of expanding at like a natural pace. It's like there is a logical consistency to the new things that we're learning about the John Wick world. So for that reason, I'm willing to forgive how somewhat preposterous it is. And also because it's just still so much damn fun. Like, those action scenes are like nothing you've seen in any other movie. And now other movies are kind of doing the John Wick thing. Like, other movies are starting to copy it, which they did with The Matrix too. Once The Matrix came out, you had never seen anything like The Matrix. And then every Super Bowl commercial was like The Matrix. So they're doing the same thing with John Wick, but John Wick is the OG with this amazing jujitsu, what they call gun fu fighting style. And I'll tell you something is, like, one thing when I've watched this with people who haven't seen it, one of the things that stands out is how John Wick never leaves loose ends. Like, in most action movies, there's that stupid cliche where, they wing the bad guy, but then they let the bad guy sort of crawl away, and then the bad guy comes back and attacks with an axe or something. It's like John Wick doesn't do that. He ends permanently every single enemy he fights, period. And to the extent he doesn't, it's only because they were able to stop him or delay him from doing that. So, like, and it's all very, within its outlandishness, the actual martial arts is pretty plausible, right? So, and I don't know firsthand, but I hear jiu-jitsu people talk about how, like, the moves look pretty actually authentic. So, but also, it builds a story in the proper way if you watch those stories. So that brings me to Um, John Wick 4, I found, try this headline. From Comic Book News, John Wick 4 box office estimated huge opening. I was just taking a gander at this. John Wick 4 opens later this month. Super excited. Estimates offer John Wick 4 will open in the $60 to $70 million range, which is more than Chapter 3's $56 million, more than Chapter 2's $30 million, and more than Chapter 1's $14 million. I mean, that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. These films build on success. Compare that to like DC constantly spinning their wheels trying to launch the Justice League. They did it the backwards way. They said, oh, we need our massive Justice League movie so we can compete with the Avengers. It's like, you don't... Even the MCU is betraying their original model. The MCU's original model was just like the John Wick model. It was one good movie. We got it. We got a profit. People liked it. Cool. Let's do 2 more new characters, Thor and Captain America. Okay. And we can build on that, right? And John Wick is doing that. It's building on success. It is never getting ahead of itself. And that is why these movies are doing so well. That is a perfect picture of what you should be seeing when sequels are working, right? 14 to 30 million to 56 million to 70 million opening, and the next one will probably be even huge. Yeah, even bigger. I was going to say huger. That's not a word. Huger. Super cool. I'm excited for this. All right, that's all that article really has to contribute. Compare that. Cocaine Bear tops Ant-Man Quantumania at the box office again. Oh my God. Quantumania is one of the dumbest films I've ever seen. I hated this movie. And you know what? It's not the worst Marvel film either. It is not the worst. I've seen Multiverse of Madness. I haven't seen the Eternals. Honest to God, I couldn't tell you one thing that happens in the Eternals that's not in the trailer because I just have not seen it, and I've not seen really. But it's not the worst. It is the most mediocre. But it is also just. It's just CGI vomit. It's CGI vomit. This movie. And oh my God, this is like, okay. I've been to a lot of writers groups. Okay. Working on my own writing and everything, and like super amateur writers who are not like, they got a long way to go, let's just say, and I love them to death and I help them as I can. But when they have a long way to go, one of the things they will do is write dialogues in which characters will withhold information that there's no reason to withhold, right? Because that's just an instinct that you have as a rookie because you need the characters talking, but you also need the plot to happen. And so you will just have the characters keep delaying it by saying things like, tell me who's chasing us. And like, there's no time for that. It's like, but who is it? What's happening? It's like, I'll tell you later. You just have to trust me. What? Well, why can't you tell me? And it just goes on like that. It's just spinning wheels. And it's like, there has to be an actual reason for the character to withhold the information because real people wouldn't talk like this, right? And that is exactly how the dialogue is in this movie. Janet Pym, who has lived for 30 years in the quantum realm, is they're being chased by something. Not like actually chased. They just know that someone's on their tail, and they just will not. And Hank Pym keeps asking, honey, who's after us? And there's time. There's actual time to reply. And she just keeps saying, I can't tell you. Or, well, she doesn't say I can't tell you. She says, I'll tell you later, right? And then he says, but honey, come on. I think you owe me an explanation. And she's like, listen, I just need you to trust me right now. I'm like, there's no reason. There's no reason for this dialogue. The whole movie's like that. Ugh, okay. Marvel getting beat out by a 500-pound black bear, which consumes a significant amount of cocaine and embarks on a drug-fueled rampage. Well, let me tell you something. Quantumania probably could only be enjoyed during a drug-fueled rampage. Oh, man. It's all downhill for Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which is turning out to be a massive bust at the box office, as once again, the flick that introduces the next MCU's big bad leads to multiple Avengers movies getting beat out by Cocaine Bear. I said this in my video. How much failure is necessary for the Marvel Cinematic Universe to please just go away? I don't want any more of this crap. I just want to remember it's like Picard. I just want to remember Iron Man and Captain America saving the world, and it was cool. Can I just have that memory and you can leave me alone? But anyway. I don't enjoy feeling this way about superhero films, by the way. I think this is what red pilled me on these, because like I was starting to feel this way in films that I normally would enjoy, and I didn't understand why. And I sympathize with kind of what they call normies, who are just, not as nerdy as I am, that are watching movies and they don't understand. I mean, they don't like it as much as they used to, but they can't really put their finger on it. And I hear that a lot from people who are like, yeah, Marvel's just not as good as it used to be. And I resist the urge to just like go full Captain Garrett on him. But, I'm like, well, this is why. That's why I have this channel. This channel is for me to unload, dear sailors and star nuts, when polite conversation would foreclose that possibility. Yeah, so I really got kind of red pilled, and now once you see the formula, you see the stupid little algorithm that they're doing in every move, you can't unsee it. Like once you see it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is, of course, girl boss genius has to be girl boss genius. Like, and I love, I hate that you even have to qualify this. It's like when I was a kid, one of my favorite characters was She-Ra. Like I've always loved female characters. This is not the way. Like, you do not just... this is the other thing. They always write all these articles about how empowering it is to see all these female superheroes and female geniuses, and I've always felt this way. I'm like, but they have fictional superpowers. That's not real. Like, I don't find it empowering to watch Captain America. I like his morals. I find his morals are inspiring, and that's a fair argument. Like, it is important to have moral examples in films, so that's fine. But like the idea that I'm seeing someone kick ass with superpowers is supposed to make me feel like more is possible for me, like I don't understand that argument at all. It's like, well, okay, you can give these characters any powers you want, so how is that making any comment on the strengths of any gender? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that's not actually making a comment on anyone's actual strength because it's fictional. No one has the strength of Captain America. No one is actually Superman. Like, Superman is not a commentary on what a human man can do. It is like, so I don't understand this argument of why it's so empowering to see all these female action heroes. But that being said. So yeah, what do we got here? February 24th, Friday, yeah. Cocaine Bear got 8.6 million. Ant-Man got 8.3. Now, this is an important point that needs to be pointed out. Cocaine Bear has a huge disadvantage against Quantumania because much fewer theaters are showing it. Quantumania, Disney owns all the theater space, man. They could just have every theater showing Quantumania all day long. So right there, Quantumania has an unfair advantage against the bear. And the bear is winning. The coked up bear is winning. March 1st, 1.5 million for Cocaine Bear. Ant-Man got 1.5, one by a nose. So just a couple like 20,000 less. And then Thursday, March 2nd, this last week, yeah, Cocaine Bear got 15,000. I'm terrible at math. 25,000 more for Cocaine Bear. Oh boy. Please, Marvel, just go away. Let's look at some comments here that I may have missed while I've been ranting and raving. Tom and Waffle, I do appreciate you stopping by. And Operation Moksha. Why'd you retract your message, Operation? Send me a message. All right, what do we got here? Read that one. Okay, Tom's Mando thoughts. Number one, Mando goes back to the first planet because he needs a droid he can trust. What makes him think that the droid from the first season is an option? Bad forced plot. Totally agree. And I missed that in my review too. It's like I got to get better at these reviews. I'm working on that. What I need to do is watch the show once, watch it again and take notes, because I hate taking notes the first watch because I want to be immersed, even if it's a bad show. That's how I experience fiction. So I need to do that again. That's meta. I'm not gonna. All right, but anyway, yeah. So he goes to this planet and he needs a droid he can trust. Which one of the tropes of his character was he did not trust droids in the beginning. So he's evolved on that. And it's you know what this is? I'll tell you what this is. Disney can no longer allow characters that are popular to die. They can't allow that. It cannot be allowed to happen because those are money in the bank, my friend. And money in the bank cannot be left on that. So everyone kind of liked, I think, the assassin droid, and so they got to bring the assassin droid back. So it's a stupid plot contrivance to revive a dead character. That is all it is. But Mahler pointed this out on his on a stream. He's pointing out, Mahler is so good. That guy is the surgeon, man. If your story has one flaw in it, prepare to have it diagnosed, my friend, because like, man. Anyway, he points out that literally there's really no reason for him to assume, as you point out, Tom, that droid is trustworthy. But honestly, just get another droid. Like, what actual justification for this incredible need for this particular droid actually is in the plot? There really is none. And then he revives it and he has to shoot it to death. And then it is exactly, and no disrespect to video game stories, because video game storytelling is an art, and it's a great art, one I'm very much a fan of, but it's for video games. It doesn't belong in scripted TV shows. Like, scripted TV shows have a certain formula for how to write good TV, which is different than how to write good movies, but I swear to God, they are writing this show like a video game. He's got a nav marker on his map, and the nav marker says, go retrieve droid part to repair droid. And it's like, and there's a side quest, it's like, Mando, uncheck the quests if you have too many, but also deal with pirate raiders who now are on your trail. And then third side quest, I would say this would be his main quest, is he must go to Mandalore to get his Mando status back. Mahler also pointed this one out. Why does he want to be a Mandalorian? I think Rags too on the Drinker's stream was it the Drinker's stream? I think it was. And they're pointing out, why does he want to be a Mandalorian? These guys are assholes and they suck at fighting. They can't fight a crocodile. And they had their whole initiation ceremony right in the crocodile feeding zone. Like, why? What is admirable about these characters? What is so great about being a freaking Mandalorian? They're pretty boring, actually. You know what? Mandalorians have like 3 skills, okay? They can fly, some of them, and they can shoot blasters, and they have armor that is the only armor in all of Star Wars that is actually effective. Those are their three defining traits. Everything else about them is boring and bland. And that is no fault of the original Star Wars films. That is no fault of the extended universe. That is the fault of Disney Star Wars writing by algorithm, is what that is. So number 2, Tom says, where is he going to put a droid in his tiny... Okay, you just hit on one of my number 1 beefs with Mandalorian. Okay, this was in season 2. He loses his ship, which that is painful. Like, check out the name of this channel, my friends. Swords and Starships. Those are like 2 of my favorite things in life. And so for me, the Millennium Falcon, the Normandy, the Enterprise, like those become characters unto themselves. And the Mandalorian ship, I can't remember the name of it, which is not a good sign. It looks like Slave One, the Boba Fett ship. I think that it was kind of similar to that. Anyway, I liked that ship. It was a cool set, and it also gave the Mandalorian a dramatic setting where he could decompress, he could talk to characters, he could plan for missions. Like, that's important. You need that in, I don't know, a space travel show. It's nice to have a set that's mobile. So he loses it, which is fine. It's a dramatic element. That happens. The Enterprise, went down in Star Trek 3, and that could be cool. But then there was this new plot arc of, like, he's got to find a new ship. And so the show, gives him this Naboo fighter. And the show portrays this as though this is an upgrade. And, like, I was baffled by that in season 2. I was like, well, I mean, this is temporary, right? Like, that's just for this one episode so he can get to the place. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's a Naboo fighter. Oh, yeah, member berry. It was, you know what it is? It's member berries. That's all it is. They're like, oh, remember Naboo fighters? Here you go. There you go. It's an upgrade. He's been upgraded now. It's like he has no room to move. Where does he go to the bathroom in this ship? That's a disturbing thought. I don't want to give that any more thought. So yeah, it's terrible. He's got nowhere to put the droid, like, and I don't care. I don't care if in episode 3 he upgrades to a new ship. I really don't care. I was like, I don't know. I don't know where they're going with that. Tom also says, where is he going to put anything in that thing? Not a good vessel for adventures. Hopefully he gets something better that can dock his small fighter. I mean, I would agree with that if I cared enough to hope anything for this show. I really don't anymore. I'm just burnt out on, I will say this. I liked a lot of The Mandalorian season 1 and a decent amount of season 2. But I've always had this kind of beef with the show, and it was that a lot of it is just side quests, and that does bore me. It does, in many episodes, bore the hell out of me. And I think what is probably what I liked about it in the beginning was that it would call back to lore, and, that only goes so far. You need a compelling narrative. And actually him saving the life of Baby Yoda, Grogu, was a compelling narrative for a while, and now it's not. It just isn't. So having Grogu back on the show is lazy, but also ineffective, because the whole reason Grogu and the Mandalorian had an interesting relationship was because of that mission. And now we don't have that mission, and we don't have that relationship, and I will further point out he's a non-speaking character who's working with an almost non-speaking character. So we have an almost non-speaking protagonist and a totally non-speaking deuteragonist, or I guess arguably co-protagonist. I mean, how are you supposed to have compelling drama with two characters that there's almost no speaking lines between them? So and frankly, I was getting worn out on this in season 1. It was like, okay, it's cute that he's a baby, but I want to actually know something about his personality. But now it's like, no, they picked the perfect alien for this. Because of his life cycle, he'll be a baby forever for the purposes of this show. And I'm like, that's terrible. My whole thing was, I kind of was excited about the idea of him training with Luke because he could come back and he could speak and he could start talking like Yoda, and that would have been cool. Maybe cool. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I have to see it first. Waffle says, I enjoyed JW 1 and 2. Sorry, I'm terrible with acronyms sometimes. JW 1 and 2. You got to tell me what JW is. But 3 felt like John Wick. That's right. We were talking about John Wick. John Wick 1 and 2, but 3 felt like the entire movie was set up for the 4th, which is fine, but it felt too much setup and less of actual movie, if it makes sense. 2 hours felt like 3. I understand that criticism. I enjoyed John Wick 3, and I like I said, I am willing to forgive some of the outlandishness of the world because of how well they've built it, how slowly and carefully they have built it, and to the extent they keep doing that, I think it will keep being pretty good. But yeah, there's only so much. I will say this, John Wick 3 was a bit of a fetch quest. It was like he's got to go to Casablanca so he can get to this guy, who can get him to that guy, who can get him back to that guy. And so that is a fair critique, and it definitely dragged the pace of the movie. And, you're just the emotional core of that first film. How are you ever going to duplicate that again? And nor should you try, because it was what it was. There was a strong emotional core of the film, which was his relationship with his wife and by extension, the dog. And that was important. And now he's kind of just on constant revenge missions, and which is not bad. It's kind of fun, but it's not as filling as, the first one. It's kind of a little bit of emotional junk food, I will admit. And Waffle goes on to say, but I heard the 4th is really good, maybe on the same level as the first movie. Chris Gore, I don't know if you heard what Chris Gore had to say on this, but he was on the Nooner, the Nerdronic Nooner, and he was saying that he's seen it, and he said it's fantastic. He said it's like his favorite one since the first one. But he pointed out that it didn't have that emotional core the first one had, And that it was, most of, I think his positive remarks were because of the action was just so good. He's like, you just have never seen John Wick action like this. And I think that's cool. Like, I'm down. I'm here for it. I'm totally excited for this. I think it's going to beat the crap out of woke Hollywood garbage that's failing. So I love that. One thing I love about John Wick is it is beating the crap out of all the repurposing franchises. Like, when you think about Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and you think about the Disney Star Wars and the Marvel and the DC and just all these properties, and they're digging up Willow. They're digging up things that are just cult classics now. They're digging up cult classics now and trying to turn them into giant MCU multiverse franchises. It's so stupid. John Wick is its own thing. John Wick is totally original and does its own thing and does it well. Like the character itself, like the title character himself, the John Wick franchise is a film franchise of focus, commitment, and sheer will. And that is a great thing. So I'm excited for 4. And I want to support it just because it is the anti-Hollywood at this point, because it's just quality storytelling that's not, shoehorning dumb political messages into it. Deuteragonist. I got that one from I got that one from a friend of mine who is very proud of his intellect, and he once commented on my work about a deuteragonist in my story, and I did not know that word until then. And now it is a fancy $6 word that I can use on my channel so that I can sound smarter than I am. Waffle says, yeah, it was Chris that said it. Yeah, I mean, Chris, even when I disagree with Chris, I trust that man's opinion on films implicitly. Implicitly. He has anything to say on a film, I lean in. And by the way, that's what I used to love about actual professional film critics. I used to love watching, I was a little bit too young for Siskel and Ebert, but I do remember watching like Ebert and Roper when Roger Ebert was still around. And then they had a great series of like guests when Ebert got sick. They had a great series of guest commentators, and they would just kind of do detailed reviews, and they would talk about the films. And what I liked about it was I didn't always agree with them, and they didn't agree with each other. And it was a lot like Red Letter Media, I would say, just not as funny. And they would just kind of mull it over, and they would talk about the films and the things they liked, the things they didn't like, the performances that worked, the performances that didn't work. And Chris Gore reminds me of that. He reminds me of that because he's actually honest. He's authentic. He's not out to like shill for anything. He just wants to give his honest opinion. And he's very passionate about what he's passionate about. And I love Alan on Film Threat too. I've definitely warmed up to Alan because at first, when I first saw Alan's reviews, he was just praising some Disney stuff. What was it he saw? He saw, I think he saw Multiverse of Madness, and he was praising, he liked it, I was like, I don't know about Alan. I don't know how I feel about that. But actually, I've come to really respect Alan too, because even when he likes something, he's got reasons, for it. And I like a lot of his takes. So definitely trust Chris Gore. What else we got? Dear sailors and starnauts. Do hit like on that screen. I know I'm checking my phone. This is very unprofessional. Okay. Let me share this headline. You're going to like this one. Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves is more woke garbage. Okay, let me just preface this by saying, I watched the trailers in good faith. Here's the thing. I'm not like the most giant Dungeons and Dragons fan that is of the fantasy world itself. I'm not super into it. I like fantasy worlds like Lord of the Rings typically better. That being said, I have played Dungeons and Dragons and really enjoyed it. And I have a very soft spot in my heart for Dungeons and Dragons, And I also it was like the first time I'd ever been introduced to an RPG when I was in like junior high. Like that was what it was. It was Dungeons and Dragons, and it was considered evil because I was raised Catholic, and it was witchcraft. I was not allowed to play it. And so I had to play it on the sly. but I loved it. I loved it. I got to be this character who was trapped in a dungeon and had to escape. And, it was just me and my friend playing it. It was cool. And that was it. From then on, I was like, I love this format. I love this idea of doing an RPG story with friends. And of course, I've DM'd several games, as you know, Squire Tom. So I have a very soft spot in my heart. Now, here's the thing. I see these trailers, right? It's drivel. It's absolute drivel. This, and I couldn't put my finger on just what it is. Because, when you see a trailer and you don't like it, you're like, this is crap, like the CGI is garbage, or the jokes are stupid, whatever it is. But there's something else bothering you, and you just can't put your finger on it. And I think what I finally hit upon with Dungeons and Dragons is this an adaptation? Watch this dumb trailer. It's got rock and roll music. Nothing in it looks medieval. All the characters sound like they're from Southern California, and they're making dumb Marvel quips all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, how is this an adaptation of the Dungeons and Dragons world? And I think I sort of chalked it up to just, I'm not a giant Dungeons and Dragons fan, so maybe I just don't get it. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, I get what they're doing. What they're doing is they're not adapting the Dungeons and Dragons world into a movie with this, Honor Among Thieves. They are adapting what they think Dungeons and Dragons is for people who play it. Okay? In other words, they're adapting the gameplay, not the in-world gameplay. They are adapting the actual gameplay from, if you've ever watched Critical Role on YouTube or whatever, if they have probably heard of or seen that, and they see people sitting around a table joking, memeing on things, making fun of each other. That's the gameplay, right? That's you're playing a game with friends. It's like a game of Uno. You're playing a game of Uno. You're adapting that experience of you're joking around a card table, right? That's what they're adapting. And they're putting a facade of fantasy over that. So essentially, Chris Pine's character, what's his name? Why am I forgetting his name? I think it's Chris Pine, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Chris Pine's character is literally like the dopey guy who's, drinking beers at the table, playing Dungeons and Dragons and doesn't take it seriously, and he knows being a bard is stupid from his perspective. He thinks being a bard is like a dumb character, and he's playing it for laughs, right? And so that's what he's doing at the game table. And then, right, so that's just an example of what they're doing. They're taking what they consider the experience of playing the game to be, and they think that's what players of the game probably want to see, is what I'm thinking. And my question is, do Dungeons & Dragons players want to see that? I don't know. I really don't, because I think Dungeons & Dragons is the most mainstream RPG tabletop thing there is. I don't think there's anything more mainstream at this point, and it was not always like that, let me tell you. That is a recent development. But now I actually think there's a certain level of just average, ordinary normies that play the game now. And dare I say, females sometimes play it. And so it's more mainstream than it used to be. So maybe there's enough normies that like it or know of it that they won't care that this is a dopey played for laughs. It's really what this is nerd face. This whole movie is making fun of nerds. Like the whole joke in the movie about, we need to make plans. Get a drink at the bar? Let's get a drink at the bar. And then it's why do we need you? And he's like, I make plans. We don't need you for that. And he's like, I'm also a bard. So let's not talk about me being a bard. And then they show him dancing around with his lute and he looks stupid. And it's because that's what they think of nerds. You're stupid for liking this. You are stupid for being 40 years old and sitting at a table with a pen and paper and writing down what you scored on the D20. You're dumb for doing that. So the only reason that people would enjoy this is if we're making fun of it. That's what they think. And that's what makes me furious about this movie. And they may not even know consciously they think that. I mean, I think they do, because Hollywood's a bunch of garbage people. But there are good people in Hollywood that are trying to do a good job, but they just don't understand the things they're adapting, I think. And so to the extent that someone is trying to adapt it, they just subconsciously don't get it, right? They just don't get why people are playing this game. Why do you play D&D? You play D&D to have fun and have drinks and have laughs, and also to immerse yourself in a serious fantasy world. That is why you play D&D. You play it because you want to be a character in a fantasy novel. That's what you want to do. You want to actually have that feeling of like Bilbo, going through the dark and he finds the magic ring and he's got to talk his way out of a deadly situation with Gollum. Like, that's cool and that's serious. That's a real story. That's a story that immerses you. D&D allows you to take the part of the character in that story. And so, yes, the meta level of it is, yes, we're friends sitting around a table laughing and memeing and joking. But the real game level of it is we're in this world together and we're adventuring. That is what the film should have adapted. It should have adapted the Dungeons and Dragons world. And in the Dungeons and Dragons world, you can die. In the Dungeons and Dragons world, an orc could behead you, right? That's what the rules are for. The D20 is to ensure that that is a possibility. That, like, your character, you get cocky, you decide to spring that trap, and you don't have the skill to do it, you could die. So there's an actual sense of stakes in the game. Even the dungeon master needs the dice, because as a friend of mine who's a pretty good Dungeons and Dragons DM put it, the dungeon master needs to have some surprise as well. The dungeon master has to also not totally know what's going to happen, because it's part of the fun. It's what creates stakes. In this film, I know exactly what's going to happen. Chris Pine's character is going to be a big, dumb oaf. He's going to get battered around by the girl bosses. Every single purpose of every single scene is going to be to make fun of the fact that we're in a fantasy world, and by extension, nerds who like fantasy worlds and take them seriously. I remember when I was a kid, like my normie, aunts and uncles I would be talking about Star Trek, going back to it's super technical. I'd be talking about how the ships work or whatever. And some jerk whose opinion I did not ask for in my family would come by and just be like, you do know that that's all fictional, right? Like, you do know that there's not really ships in space, right? Like, you do know that, right? And I'd just be like, I would argue with him. Now I realize how futile that was, but really, yeah, I know. I fucking know. Thank you. Thank you for once again pointing out what every nerd since the beginning of time has always known. Most of humanity thinks this is stupid. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I really appreciate that. But no, my point is I've made my peace with it because it just is what it is. And it's actually kind of the cool thing about being a nerd. It's like, you just understand that it's okay that we all have different interests in life. Not everybody's interested in the same things. And, some people are super wonky about football statistics and fantasy football. And I think that's great. I have zero interest in any of that. But I would never set out to make a movie that was, obviously, if the purpose is to be a comedy movie, that's one thing. But I would never seek to make a movie for that audience that is there to humiliate them. I just think that's counterproductive. You know what I mean? So let me help out a friend who's trying to get into this. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry, I know, super unprofessional. Okay. Look, I need all the viewers I can get. All right, what is the chat saying? Fu Man Blue says LOL. Which one? I had a lot of good ones in there. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, Dungeons & Dragons, where am I at here? I'm sorry, I just lost the plot totally. Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves, more woke garbage. So this just piles on, because I didn't know if this movie's going to be woke. It kind of looked pretty woke in the trailers, but sometimes they're not as bad as they look in the trailers. It is Chris Pine, I was right about that. Yeah, so here's this D&D fan. He's writing this article. I wasn't actually sure if it was going woke, but I knew it was going to be goofy based on Chris Pine playing a bard and what I've seen from the footage. I figured it was just another wannabe goofy Guardians of the Galaxy type movie. Yeah, that was my first knee-jerk reaction too. I was like, I think they're going for a Guardians thing, but every time I'd see that trailer, it just made me want to frickin' blind myself. I hate that trailer, both of them, so much. I can't even describe to you. Like, the stupid chest that, like the treasure chest that opens up and turns out to be teeth, and it's played for laughs. It's like, dude, what if Guillermo del Toro did that? What if Guillermo del Toro did the chest that comes to life and tries to eat you? It would be freaking scary. Mark my words. That would be one of the best parts of the movie if Guillermo del Toro did that. But no, they don't play it that way. Pan's Labyrinth, man. What a great, creepy, scary fantasy world that is, right? It's like, why couldn't you make the D&D world more like that? That would be cool. So anyway, but then, as I just mentioned in that extended rant, I mean, then I realized, no, this isn't Guardians of the Galaxy. This is Nerdface. That's what this is. They are memeing on people who play D&D. That's what this movie is. They're memeing on us. Which, you know, if it were done in an affectionate way, never mind. However, oh yeah, this was the quote. They love emasculating leading men. In an interview with the directors and writers, it was learned that they changed everything about the characters in order to fit with their agenda, which is the definition of wokeness. Agreed. Oddly, co-director Jonathan Goldstein claims it isn't woke, but it seems likely he is just trying to deflect opposition to his movie, as woke after woke project has failed big time in Hollywood, and no doubt Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves will be next, and they don't want the woke label. Speaking with Variety, the directors of the flick reveal they intentionally emasculated the male characters and made the female characters look better. That's woke AF. Exactly, because real storytelling with actual strong, not every character is strong, by the way. So why does every female character have to be strong? There are strong and weak characters in life and in stories. So number one, I hate this phrase, strong female character. How about female characters? Some of them are strong and some of them aren't. How about that? Balance. That's storytelling. Woke storytelling is we want to project a false projection of the world that doesn't exist in real life. It does not exist. We want to create a movie that conforms to the reality that we want portrayed. Because, here, just pause for a moment. What is wokeness? Wokeness is force. Wokeness is the use of force. That's basically what it is. You can persuade people of your point of view. You can have stories that are allegories that are meant to kind of have a lesson in them or a message in them. You can have fictional stories like Star Trek has done in the past, debate ethical issues that are relevant to modern issues, but in a way that invites people to think and be persuaded. That's one way to do things. Another way is propaganda. And propaganda is just force. That's basically all that is. So that's what wokeness is. Wokeness is, we want to see more women recognized as geniuses. We will write a story in which women are always geniuses. And if people don't like it, it's because they don't agree with that idea. They don't like women as geniuses. And it's like, no, that's not. No. The character was annoying and stupid and was not very likable. That's why people didn't like it. Or the concept of this character being a genius was implausible in this context, right? But they're not interested in that. They just want to portray what they think reality should be, and they don't care if the audience buys it or not. They're not interested in whether the audience is not a participant in woke storytelling. The audience is not a participant. The audience they are to accept what is being presented to them and not question it. They are there to be downloaded with information that they should already have in their psyche, but because they're such bigots, they don't yet. And so they are there to receive their download, and they are there to praise the great artists of the state for giving them the benefit of their knowledge. And that is what woke storytelling is. So I am totally fine with liberal storytelling. I'm just not okay with woke storytelling. They went out of their way to make the male characters look like big pussies, while the female characters are the strong ones. That's woke AF. Okay, yeah, I read that already. I want to get to the quote. What was the actual quote? I can't find the quote in here. John Francis DeLay and Jonathan Goldstein answer back, they didn't intentionally go out of their way for wokeness, yet they say they love emasculating men. And they say that, I can't find where he quoted them directly in here, but I probably missed it. Anyway, but there you have it. So these writers, the gist of it is these writers basically say, yeah, we're not making a woke movie, but we just love emasculating men. That's just our storytelling style. We just think that's fun. We just think that's the way you do it. And it's like, okay, well, that's garbage. And that's a shitty way to tell a story. And, it's like Rian Johnson. Well, I just like killing off the principal villain in the story for no reason. I just like doing that. I think that's a really fun story. It's like, okay, well, you just destroyed the entire narrative of the entire trilogy. Well, I stand by it. I subverted expectations. It's like, okay. Fu Man Blue says, people without imagination are a real thing. They don't care or think about it until they see someone enjoying the fruits of their imaginative effort. Then they get jealous. I want to think about that again. People without imagination are a real thing. Agreed. They don't care or think about it until they see someone enjoying the fruits of their imaginative effort. I'm not sure. So you're saying... So they have no imagination, but then they don't think about it until someone is enjoying the fruits of their imaginative effort. Okay, I think I see what you're saying. So someone like Rian Johnson, who really has no imagination. Yeah, I don't get what you're saying. I'm sorry, Fu Man Blue. Then I do agree that people without imagination are very jealous of people that do great things. So Tom says, that was with regard to the person who asked if you knew Star Trek ships weren't real. Oh, okay, thanks. Thanks, Squire Tom. I appreciate that. That helps. Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. See, I got to stay current on the chat, right? I miss it. Okay, yeah. No, that's a great point. So the reason that they're coming along saying, that's fiction, right? That there's not really Captain Kirk out there in space. Like, you understand that's fiction. Yeah, they're trying to... I mean, I don't want to get super melodramatic here, but it's the crabs in a bucket thing, right? They're trying to take something, they just don't like, it's just human nature. I'm not even blaming any particular subset of humans. It's just human nature. We're a little bit crabs in a bucket. We see one of the crabs start to crawl out and we start pulling at them. And, and when I catch myself doing it to other people in whatever ways, I really try to notice that and pull back and be like, oh, there it was, that human instinct to not like it when someone else stands out about doing something. And I think that's why it's hard, man. It's hard to be exuberant. This may surprise you or maybe not. I don't know. I was a very exuberant guy when I was a little kid. I was very exuberant. I would dance, I would sing, I would make jokes, and then life beat the shit out of me. and I stopped doing that. And I became very quiet and reserved. And I actually began to think I had always been that way. I was very introverted for a long time. And I still consider myself to an extent introverted, but I really was I wouldn't talk to people. And it took me a long time and a lot of, basically being drunk a lot to suddenly realize what it was, that I was trying to get away from, and that's part of it too. It's like standing out. It's brutal, man. People and when people see that you're having fun and they can't share that with you, they could just wish you well and say, "Oh, that's great that you like that," and move on. But they can't. Some people have to be petty and they have to try and take that away from you, or they have to justify in their own minds why they think. I used to do this with sports. To be fair, you know what? I was guilty of this with sports. Like, there was a time early in my life I hated sports. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why people like it. And I would tell people that. I'd just be like, you do get that none of this matters. They're just players on a field. Like, there's just arbitrary rules that they're following. Like, why does anybody like this? And now I recognize that was the same thing. It's like, I am a crab in a bucket and I'm taking someone's fun away. And so I don't do that anymore. And actually, I quite envy sports fans. I really do. I love how much fun they're having, and I wish I could have that fun. I wish I could care, like how many shots Kobe makes, or, that pass that the quarterback caught. I just, I could not care less. But I love that people care about it, and I did enjoy hanging out with people that cared about it, because everyone was having fun, and people with different political opinions weren't arguing. They were just agreeing on how much they loved the game and how interesting it was, and debating this call by the ref and that statistic that this player had and who's going to get drafted next. And it was all gobbledygook to me, but I enjoyed watching it. I was like, oh, they're having so much fun. So that makes me sadder than it kind of is. Like, so yeah, I make it a practice. It's my own personal practice when I notice that, and really it's kind of futile to like never, engage in these behaviors, because we're all human. We're just flawed creatures. It's just our nature. But if you can notice when you're kind of taking the air out of someone's balloon without realizing it, once you notice it, you kind of naturally stop doing it, because once you see it in yourself, you're like, oh, I'm doing that. Okay. And so I try not to take the piss out of sports fans. I envy them greatly, and that's probably part of it. So you're probably right. The people that were giving me shit for liking Star Trek, maybe there was some envy there. Maybe it was like, oh man, he's so into this. He thinks Kirk is out there saving the galaxy. He cares so much about it. I couldn't care less about Romulans. And it's like, so I got to take him down a peg. Passes. I did not say passes that quarterback catch. What I said caught. The quarterback. That's not an accurate quote, Tom. I did not say passes that quarterback's catch. But it is possible. I may have. I know nothing about sports. I was like, this is the weirdest thing, though. This is the weirdest thing. I kind of enjoy when people are commentating on sports, though, even though I don't understand it and I don't care. I kind of enjoy good commentators commenting on it, because they actually can start to tell a story that makes sense to me. Like, what's a good example of this? Well, actually, Sports Wars, actually, the Geeks and Gamers site, they have the Sports Wars site, Ryan Kinnell and D-Day Cobra. Sometimes they'll talk about it, and they'll talk about their theories about things, and I'll kind of get pulled in a little bit. I'll kind of be like, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm never going to watch it, and I don't actually care that much, but for some reason, for a brief moment, when I'm hearing them talk about it, it's fun to listen to. I don't know why. It's weird. It's not like I go out of my way to listen to it, but I kind of enjoy it. Watching like an auctioneer. Okay, I suppose there are some trick plays in which, Tom, okay, I've really outed myself here, because it's like he doesn't even understand how a football quarterback works. Like, I mean, there's not knowing sports, and then there's that. But no, I don't. I can't even give an example. I can't even give an example of like a play, because I just don't even. Look, I like it, Lord of the Rings and Star Trek Picard. And it's really Star Trek: The Next Gen season 8, but that's my jam, man. I could write a story though about a character who cares about sports. That I could do. I'd have to do some research, and I'd have to edit a lot, but I could do it. So okay, I want to talk about The Last of Us. I saved the worst for last. I did. The last of our topics is The Last of Us TV series. Anyone in the chat like this show? Please, and I'm open. I'm open to whatever thoughts people have on this, because it's kind of all over the board on this show. There's people, all of my favorite commentators are kind of all over the map. Some think it's garbage, some love it. And my comments, actually, no, I could read some comments. We'll do that. This show started out strong, and I've always wanted to play the game. I've never had a PlayStation though, so I've just never got a chance to play it, but I've always wanted to play it. And I played like the first 2 hours of it, I would say, so I kind of know some of it, the early parts of it. But I just wanted to take in this series as maybe this would be a good. I love the cordyceps fungus thing. I think that's the coolest idea for zombies ever, like bar none. The cordyceps, because when you read the theory behind it, which the show obviously explains pretty well, but the original Neil Druckmann's concept for it, I don't know if it was his concept exactly. I don't know that much about the backstory to the writing of the game. I just know that the original writer who came up with that idea had read about the ants having their brain taken over by the cordyceps fungus, and that's where they got the idea. And I thought, that is cool. Super cool. So I love the concept, and that first scene where the scientists are talking about it was excellent. Maybe just make that a short story on a YouTube channel, and it's perfect, right? Just that one scene with the scientists, and it's like, that's it. So I'm going to pause for 1 second here because I just need to take a quick break, and I will be back. Okay, we are back. We are back. All right, so getting back to The Last of Us. So the first couple episodes, the first episode I thought was pretty good. Because there's some great high concept discussion, which that's what sci-fi really is when it's at its best, is it's high concept ideas, right? And so I really enjoyed the kind of just scientists debating the implications of viruses versus fungus as a threat to humanity. It's like, dude, this is what sci-fi is great at, is stuff like this. And then they followed the opening of the game pretty carefully with Joel and his daughter, and that was all really well done. And I was pretty into it. And it was a fair first episode. You know, it wasn't, I wasn't like, I kind of had the feeling of like, I need to see more for I'm really into this, but that's a fair, good opener. right there. And right away, the way they portray the decay of civilization is very good. Because one of my big complaints of The Walking Dead is like they would be wandering through the wasteland, and it's like mowed lawns, and it's like the gas in all the cars is still They finally fixed that problem in the very late seasons of Walking Dead. They actually finally started addressing the idea that like there is now a scarcity of ammo. Like it's all been looted. Everything's been picked over. There's been enough years that there's nothing to find. And so they have to start actually using bows and arrows. And there's no cars anymore. There's no gas-powered cars in the later seasons of Walking Dead. So credit where it's due. But for a long time, it was like mowed lawns. And you're like, no, I don't think that's how the apocalypse would look. So Last of Us at least makes the city look really plausibly decayed, and that's all really cool. They're drafting on what was already created. This is, again, it's hard to give the writers of this show are the Chernobyl writers. Chernobyl is one of the best. It is the best miniseries I've ever seen. Like, if you've not seen Chernobyl, oh my God, it is fantastic. There's one episode that drags a little, but it's fantastic. Everyone should see it. And I'm kind of obsessed with the Chernobyl disaster and nuclear disasters in general. So that was kind of in my wheelhouse, but I cannot give these writers too much credit because most of what's good about this show came from the game. That's just all there is to it. Like, it came from the game. It's just like, David Benioff and DB Weiss. David Benioff and DB Weiss. That's who it was. The writers of Game of Thrones. Like, it turned out that everything that looked like genius writing on their part turned out to just be George R.R. Martin's source material. And I think that's what's happened here. Is I don't think these writers are delivering the best. The best parts of the show are not coming from them. It's coming from what was already established. But they are contributing some pretty good stuff. So I liked episode 1. Episode 2 felt a little bit fillery. It was a little bit of filler. It was like, it was a nice ending for Tess. By the way, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it, there will be some spoilers. I'm not going to go too deep into it. But I may spoil something. So I'm just warning you. But yeah, so Tess's exit from the show was well done. Although in retrospect, it was kind of, there were some stupid aspects of that, I will agree. But at least it was a heroic death and it made sense. And I love the actress who played Tess. She was in Fringe. She was great in that show. So then we get episode 3, and if you've seen my review, I actually liked Bill and Frank's story, and and I will say this. I immediately, the woke alarm went off in my head when that episode, it was clear. When he sat at the piano, I'm like, I know where this is going. And I didn't know from the game because I hadn't played that far. So I'm like, but I know where this is going. And then it goes there, but it's actually done in this really complex and character-driven way, and it felt authentic. Still, to have your third episode is not supposed to be about 2 ancillary characters. Your third episode, and by the way, a flashback like that could only be justified if the payoff for the principal characters, Joel and Ellie, was so crucial. Like, if we were so deadly curious about something in the backstory that would explain something in the present, then that might have made sense. But really, all they did is basically say, we just want to take one. It was like the Boba Fett thing. The Mandalorian takes over Boba Fett's show for 2 whole episodes. It's insane. Like, this is bizarre storytelling. The third episode of Last of Us, to me, despite it in isolation being a great story, truly actually a really great story. That episode in isolation would have been a nice little short story. And Nick Offerman was brilliant in that episode. But number 1, it's about a subject matter that does not have a broad appeal. Number 2, it is not germane to the journey of Joel and Ellie to the extent that it needed to be to justify that much screen time. So that was a big red flag. I was like, you know what, this is not going great. You get one of these series. You've earned enough of my trust. I wouldn't say trust. I've never trusted this series. You've earned enough of my interest to get one of these. But we better see some zombies in episode 4. Like, we better see some action. And you know what? I will just tell you that pretty much the rest of the the only good episode of this season that was really good, was episode, let's see, what are the episodes we got so far? I'm going to go through this list here because I literally just, I'm going to the Wikipedia list and let's just see what we get with this show. Episode 1 is good. 2 is fine. Long time. We know how that went. Yeah, so that's it. 4 and 5 were the two about the Kansas City arc. And those have been the only 2 good episodes, really. And Endure and Survive was the best episode of the series. Like, seeing Joel up in the sniper post, picking off zombies for Ellie, that was fantastic. Like, that was great. That was the only time you were ever going to see... That is the only time you're ever going to see Chad Joel. I'm sorry to tell you, because the rest of this series, I don't understand this either. It's like every time they get weapons, okay, episode 3, what was the whole point of that backstory? It was to tell the story, ostensibly, for how Joel got this arsenal of weapons in the truck. That was the point. Oh, because of this wonderful, beautiful love story happened, Joel and Ellie got the truck and all the weapons. What happens in the very next episode? They lose all the weapons. They lose the truck. They lose the truck and the weapons in the next episode. So there was literally no reason for the Bill and Frank episode. There was no reason for it. It was a waste of time. It contributed 0 to the story that could not have been contributed in one line of dialogue. One line. Oh, what's with this truck? Well, I had this friend Bill and he left it here for me. Check out this letter. There you go. You've got your truck in your arsenal. Awesome. And you lose it in the next episode. Fine. That's a fair trade. One line of dialogue, we lose it in the next episode anyway. But I really enjoyed, of course, every resistance leader in this show is a woman. Like every single one. And I know how that sounds. My point is, I'm just asking. It's the apocalypse. It's Mad Max. You know, we've got raiders and pirates and all kinds of cannibals out there. Who are the strongest, most feared leaders going to be? On average. I'm not even saying there's not at least a few scary, dangerous women out there. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying how many out of 10? Anyway, my point is, but actually I really did like this is a problem with the show. It is still well written despite it using these cliches and despite it using these tropes. It's actually still pretty well written to a point. So I enjoyed watching Joel fight with the resistance leader. I kind of enjoyed Henry's story. That was it. That was the one episode that was a zombie apocalypse episode for me. Everything else in this has been filler or backstory. All of it. So. And the last 2 episodes were awful. I'm still working on my review because they were kind of so boring that, and it's interesting too, is like, I got a comment from someone saying they really enjoyed this season, and which is fine. If you're enjoying it, I understand. Here's the thing though. Joel, he loses his weapons all the time. He gets ambushed all the time. He's effective against like one enemy at a time. If there are 2 enemies after Joel, there's like a 70% chance he's getting stabbed or someone's going to get the drop on him. Like he almost never is a badass in this show. And I'm not expecting him to be John Wick. I'm not saying he has to be, but like Rick Grimes, take Rick Grimes from Walking Dead. Like Rick Grimes was a badass, but a plausible badass. Like he also would get ambushed at times. He also would step in it, but he also would sometimes, you know, he would earn the fact that he was a good leader and he was deadly. Like that was clear with the character of Rick Grimes, why he was deadly and why he was a leader. You get none of that with Joel. You get none of it. And Pedro Pascal is a great actor, but I don't know. This is not a great role for him. Let's see what the chat's saying here. Tom says, there's some hope that they'll make changes to improve future stories like part 2, but probably not enough. And I kind of had the same thought as like, if they don't change season 2, if they don't change the golf club thing, then, you know, this show's dead. Like if Joel Getting the golf club treatment is not retconned in this show, or not taken out of it. It's going to be awful. But the problem is, I kind of no longer care one way or the other. I kind of, like, the show lost me. They had sort of one chance to tell me a compelling zombie. What could be more interesting than these two characters journeying across the wasteland of the United States? There's no reason that should fail as a story. There's no reason for that. And it could still have been an episodic story. In fact, it should be an episodic story, because there should be these little vignettes where Joel and Ellie arrive in a town, and they have to get through it, or they have to get something in it, or they have to get to the other side. And along the way, they get involved in something. And then the next episode, they get involved in, and they should be exciting somethings, but they get involved in something. Instead, what we get is these backstories. And so the very last episode, we do a long extended flashback. Again, it's another Bill and Frank, although this time it's Ellie and Riley. And it's a teen lesbian romance story. And everyone's praising it to the hilt. All the Access media love it. See, this is the thing. Nobody looks at this as just a story, because it's the message. It's on message. We like lesbians, right? And if you don't think this is an interesting story, it's because you're a bigot. And it's like, okay, let's just redo this episode, but it's a boy. It's her and the boy that she has a crush on, right? And I still think it's a boring waste of an episode. A teen romance, a teen CW romance in a mall for 40 minutes is worth my time. It has nothing to do with whether it's same sex or not. It's the fact that it was a CW episode. There was nothing. And the actress who played Riley, this is the other problem with identity politics, right? Because all that matters is the propaganda and the message and who's being in the color of the skin of the person being cast in a role. The actual talent of said actor is secondary. And so the actress who played Riley annoyed the crap out of me, because every line, it's like when you're listening to music and you hear a false note. It was like every line she delivered was a false, discordant note. Bella Ramsey's a good enough actor that even though her character annoys the shit out of me, she's a good enough actor that, like, I don't get that with her. But like with this other actor, she would just keep saying these lines, and it sounded like a Southern California snarky teenager acting badly like a California snarky teenager. So it was like 2 degrees of separation of bad acting. It was like, when like teenagers think they're hot shit and they're kind of putting on that front of like, I'm hot shit, and it's laughable because you're like, all right. It's like they think they're so cool. It's like, that's what that actor was like to me. And so watching this episode was nails on a chalkboard. What else, Tom? I'm getting through all the comments here. Yeah. Certain elements of the team would have to be cut. And the first guy whose idea it was to come back, meaning, getting rid of the golf club. Yeah, you'd have to make some changes. The Bill and Frank episode was the only one I thought that was good television after watching. My woke-o-meter didn't go off at all while or after watching. Mine did at first. My woke-o-meter went off right in the beginning. And here's what the woke-o-meter is telling me. It's that you must like this episode. You must not feel discomfort when you see these two men kiss. That's the implicit threat that woke storytelling has, right? You can feel it. You may not consciously be aware of it, but you feel it. You feel this pressure. There's this subtle pressure. You must like this. That's two men kissing. Did you not like that? Yeah. Did you like that? You're being observed by that's the weird thing about woke storytelling. You should be the observer. You are observing a story, but really it's you that's being observed by the story. That's what I hate about it. I'm okay with a gay romance that knows its audience and is allowing that audience to take part in it. But like, I felt like this episode was wanting the audience, was threatening the audience a little bit. Not badly. It was a good story, but now that I've seen more, I actually do think it was a woke episode, because I now realize that the whole reason that they abandoned the main story to tell that story was because it was a gay romance. That's the only reason they did it. And it was a well-told gay romance, but that doesn't change the fact that it was shoehorned in and we're not allowed to dislike it. And I liked the episode, but people need to be allowed to dislike it. And people, frankly, have a right to be a little uncomfortable. You know, it's like I would like it if people were not made uncomfortable by gay romance. I would like that more, but that's not reality. And I think it's not fair to demand that of people. It's like people have their feelings about things and they're right and they're entitled to have them. And I don't like this trend that people are being forced to like things. And it's resulting in bad storytelling because the only reason that there's any pressure to tell a good story is so that the audience will like it and it will be successful. The point of the Bill and Frank episode, Tom writes, was the note that Bill left behind, telling Joel that his purpose was to protect Ellie. That's a good point. You're right. I did overlook that. Is an important part of it. Still, the whole episode for that. And the beauty of it was that the note was regarding Tess. Agreed. That was beautiful. I did, and I quite liked that ending. Look, what I loved about that episode was really not the love story as much as the life story. It was the story of a man who had cut himself off from humanity his whole life and had never really connected with other humans. And in this one moment, he shows mercy to one person against his better judgment. He shows mercy and generosity to one person. And he winds up accidentally finding the love of his life, who changes his life, and he builds a life. That was a beautiful thing to see, but the problem is this is the wrong vehicle. This is the wrong episode for it. Fu Man Blue says, that was nice of you, but he is not a great actor. I assume you're talking about Pedro Pascal. I'm curious to hear more about why you think he's not a great actor. I mean, is he like a great actor of our time? No, I guess maybe I'm a little partial to him because I really loved Prince Oberyn in Game of Thrones. And I do think he was, what's he been good at? Mandalorian, he doesn't really act in Mandalorian, so that's not really a good one. I liked him in Narcos. You may have a point, Fu Man Blue. I think you may have a point there. He's a one-dimensional adult pretender that has come to be a popular choice for the woke casting directors. No denying that. They don't need talent at all. They didn't need to make it a good story. Yeah, I mean, here's where I will give the Tlu writers a little credit for episode 3. I mean, it was a well-written story with character nuance, but you're right that they didn't have to tell a good story. They could have just had any gay romance and then dared you not to like it. And then it's like, but they actually are... The writers of this show are talented. If you've seen Chernobyl, they are great storytellers. But unfortunately, the woke mind virus, nobody is immune. That's how mind viruses work. Nobody's immune to it. We all can be infected by a mind virus, and that is why it is important that we keep. That's why free. Honestly, okay, I'm not to get too pedantic here, but like. That's why free speech is actually so important, because without free speech, we all become drones. Like without free speech, we all descend into our own echo chambers, and usually that results in a single state-led echo chamber. That's basically what it results. No free speech means eventually there will be one party, one leader, one way of thinking, and the whole country, the whole society, the whole civilization will be required to agree. See North Korea, for examples. That is the result of no free speech. And so free speech is actually what inoculates us, I think, against mind viruses, because we're able to talk to each other and we're also able to have our views challenged. You know, I'm sitting here talking to you and you're challenging, yeah, Pedro Pascal's not a good actor. See, you're challenging what I think about it. And that's healthy. That's healthy human behavior, is to challenge each other. And woke behavior does not believe in that. Woke behavior believes this is the correct attitude, and if you don't agree with it, you're wrong and you must be silenced, because it's dangerous for you to contradict that. It's dangerous. I think that's what's so dangerous about woke thinking, is that they consider anything that contradicts their worldview dangerous. They don't just consider it wrong. See, it'd be one thing if they just considered it wrong, It's that they consider it dangerous and it must be stopped. That's what's so scary about woke thinking. And that's why, and believe me, if the same version of that shifts over to the right, I will be sounding the alarms on that too, because the right is not immune to this. This is a human problem. This is not a right-left problem. We, as creatures, we're herd animals. We are tempted by these ideas. We are tempted by groupthink, and I try to resist that as much as possible. So, what else? So one thing that's kind of cool, if I might toot my own horn just a little bit, not really. I really just want this channel to be successful because eventually I plan to have a staff. I plan to build this. I love what Jeremy's done with Geeks and Gamers. Like in that has given me something to aspire to. It's like having a network of channels would be great. Because really what I want to do is create Iron Age content. I want to create an alternative to these stories. So to the extent the channel is successful, I consider it, our success. And so I have one video that has gone a little bit, at least by my standards, it has gone viral. And I've never had anything I've never won a raffle. I've never had anything go viral on Twitter. I'm just not, in the Fallout system, my luck is at like 1. My luck is 1. And I'm not saying it's luck. I'm just saying if I were being graded in the special system in Fallout, I'm like charisma 10. Okay, I'm just kidding. And like luck 1. So let's see here. Have you heard of like people who play the Fallout game with like minimal intelligence, like 0 intelligence, but like 10 in luck? And like they're like super weak in all their other stats, but they just dump everything into luck and they just wind up kind of blundering through the wasteland and getting lucky all the time. I've always wanted to play that style, but I've never had the guts to do it. Yeah, so Rise, Roar, Revolt, RRR. I did a review on this. Chris Gore, I super chatted the Nooner and I asked Chris Gore, I told him I was going to do this review, in his honor since he convinced me to watch it. And he was like, well, I predict your channel will blow up if you do that. And I was like, yeah, well, you haven't, I'm not even at 1,000 yet, so I don't think that's likely. But sure enough, the RRR review, it's at 49,000 views. It's at 49,000 views. And I have no idea what to do with this. I'm like, make more RRR videos? I'm open to suggestions here. But would that be grifting? I don't know. Would that be grifting to just start making RRR content because that was what got me views? It's weird. It's weird to walk that tightrope, to be like, okay, I want to do more successful things. I want to capitalize on success, but also I want to be true to my channel and what I'm trying to do. And I loved RRR. It was a great film, but this is not the Indian cinema channel, right? This is a science fiction, fantasy, historical channel, mostly, is pretty much what it is. And RRR, I think, fits that category because it is very much a historical action adventure about rebellion. But I'm not going to go through the whole, canon of Indian cinema, right? This is not a foreign cinema channel. So if there is something that's germane, I'll do it. So anyway, how do I capitalize on this? I don't know. My thoughts is I think I just keep making content and just keep doing what I can. But in any case, I'm grateful for those 49,000 views. And any of you who join this channel for my RR video, let me know what you want to see. Anyone, let me know what you want to see. And I'm going to make more of that. But I think the way you play it is you just keep going. So I have not actually looked at any of the comments on this video yet. Wow, that's weird. I did not actually... So chapters have been added to my video, and I don't remember adding them. Does YouTube do that automatically? If so, cool. Maybe I probably checked. I'm new at this, okay? I probably checked some box somewhere that did it for me. That's pretty cool. I got to figure out how to do that again. Yeah, a lot of the comments were pointing out that the great line that impressed me from the film was from the Bhagavad Gita. one of Hinduism's central sacred texts, as mentioned in comments below. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's this great line in the film where Ramu, who's he's the principal character, he's at the mercy of the bad guys, and he's doing pull-ups in his prison cell. And they're like, there's no reason for you to do this. Like, you're trying to stay in shape. Like, you're scheduled for execution. You're going to die. Like, there's no reason to do it. And he quotes this line, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically says, you are entitled to the work, but not the result. And then he kind of goes on to elaborate that he'll never stop working on his goal no matter what. And I freaking loved it. It was like, that's inspiring. And then the commenters are letting me know that's actually from the Bhagavad Gita, and I didn't know that. It's like, wow, that's brilliant. That's beautiful. It's a lot of... There is great wisdom in religious texts of all kinds, regardless of what humans choose to do with that wisdom. I do think there's great wisdom in all religious texts, and so I definitely appreciate learning that. You have the right to you have the right to work only, but not to expect the result. Let not the fruits of action be your motive, nor let your attachment be to inaction. That's a great piece of wisdom for a fledgling YouTube channel, I would say. And really, I kind of adopted that as part of my ethic for building this channel. It's like, you have the right to work only, but not to expect the result. Let not the fruits of action be your motives, nor let your attachment be to inaction. I love that. What do you think about that? I think that's a great way to live right there. And it's not, the way I interpret that is, it's not that having a goal is a bad thing. You have to have a goal, because if your GPS is not set, you don't know where you're going. And of course, the character himself is talking about his goal. But what he's saying is, it can't only be because of the result. You can't only want something just because of what you think you'll get from it. Like, there has to be some element of the work that is meaningful, because all we really have, as Eckhart Tolle would say, is the present moment. All we really have is right now. And I'm not a believer that you should just be happy with what you have and never strive for more. I don't believe in that, but nor do I believe in sacrificing everything for your goal. And that lesson I've learned the hard way, let's just say. There has to be something in the present to live for. But I think that's what a good goal is. A good goal is something where you enjoy the work to get there, because once you actually get the goal, like my first goal for this channel was 100 subscribers, right? And to me, that was like, 100 subscribers, what a towering achievement that would be. And I'm like, maybe I could get there in a month, or maybe I could get there in like 2 months. I got there. Thank you, Sailors and Starnauts. I got there in 2 months. I got to 400, and where are we at now? We are at 437. Almost halfway to 1,000 in, really, it was like 7 weeks, I would say, is about where... that's awesome, and I'm so excited about that. But now that I have achieved that goal, it's interesting. It's like, now my mind is on the next goal, right? And so no matter where it's not the actual goal itself that makes you happy. It's helpful and it's important. You want to hit your goals, but it's not the actual goal that makes you happy. It's the meaningful work and investment of time in pursuing that goal. That's actually what makes life worth living. And that's why I think people who retire without a plan, they go back to work, or they get miserable, or they get bored, because it's like, yeah, the goal was retirement. And once you get retired, if you have no additional goal, you're going to be miserable, because like life isn't worth living if there isn't something to work for. So no, I think there's great wisdom in that line from the Bhagavad Gita. Let me see if I missed any comments here. Did I get some new subs from FNT last night? I'll tell you what. The first time I posted the first super chat I sent on Friday Night Tights, and that was kind of, I had 8 subscribers, and I'm like, my channel's new. I just started. I got to get some momentum, and I love super chatting my favorite YouTubers. And so this time I'm like, I'm going to super chat. And a lot of people also have done this. And I've found other channels this way too, by people sending in super chats announcing I found a Drink with Crazy. I found him through Friday Night Tight. So I said, I'll do the same thing. And but I always look at it as I also want to leave a gift, because the purpose of super chats is, as the great Rush Limbaugh would have said, to make the host look good, but also I think it's to contribute something to the audience. And I want, I always try to make my super chats a gift for the hosts and the panel, and also for the audience. So to the extent I've achieved that, I'm glad. So I left that first super chat, and I thought, if I get maybe 10 subs from this, that'll be nice. Like, that would be nice. I'm not expecting anything, but if I get some subs, 10 or 20, that's movement, and that's a good thing. I woke up the next day, I had 70 subscribers. I'm like, what? And then the next day, I was over 100. It was like, well, it was maybe 1 or 2 days later, I was at 100. And it was like, that was my goal for a month. That was my month goal. And I achieved it in like 3 days, really 8 days, because I started, and that was awesome. And I feel I'm super grateful for that. So last night I did another super chat, and I think what's funny is I didn't get like a huge bump from that, but I've been getting, it's started to pick up momentum now. Every day I've got a few more, and I think part of it is just some of the visibility the RRR review got, and I don't know. My goal is that this is my attitude about creative endeavors in general. It's about the work. You've got to do the work. Your professional mindset is the work comes first. And the rewards, the results are nice, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because, well, as the great Stephen Pressfield puts it, because we have no choice. Because what else am I going to do with my life? To be an artist, believe me, I'm not trying to be all up my own asshole about being an artist. Don't misunderstand. I'm just saying, like, it's hard to make money as an artist. Let's just put it realistically. So why would anyone pursue it? I should have given up a long time ago, quite frankly, if I was ever going to give up. And I've thought about it. I certainly have, writing books and stuff, that is. But I can't. I've really seriously considered not writing anymore, and I can't do it. Like, I know that it's what I have to do, because these stories are there. They're in me. I have to get them out somehow. And this channel is part of that goal. But this channel itself is a creative pursuit. And in order to achieve that, you must be a professional. And a professional shows up to work and does the work. And sometimes they get results and sometimes they don't. And they make changes where they can. But it is not their identity. It's not who they are. It's what they do. And so I don't know why I went on that long tangent. I don't know if that answered your question. So I'm sorry if I did not. But yeah, I got a few subs from F&T. Probably, it's hard to tell where they come from now because I've been doing this for a while. But that first bump definitely was F&T. I got my first 100 were all F&T, guaranteed. So Fuban Blue says, everything just falls into place for us, I hear. Like a domino. Love, CG. CG. Wow, GL. Okay, I don't know what those are. This is probably going to be the thing I get memed on as my channel grows, is like, even acronyms I should know, I'll just totally blank on. I'll just be like, what is that? And then someone will tell me, oh yeah, okay, yeah, got it. What's your favorite movie, lad? Says Polo Surf. What's my favorite movie? That's the worst question to ask anyone. That's impossible to answer. What's your favorite movie, Polo? Let me know. Can you answer that question? If you can, you're an impressive individual. That's all I will say. But if I had to give you an answer, you're not going to like it because it's kind of a cheat, but I would say the Lord of the Rings trilogy is my favorite film of all time. And you would probably say, but Captain, that's 3 films, not 1. And I would say, no, it's 1 film. It's The Lord of the Rings, and it's 3 chapters. And that's how I view that film. And I can't pick a favorite of those 3. I can't. I've tried. It's impossible. Fellowship of the Ring is my favorite Lord of the Rings film. Why? Because it's the journey. It's the classic fantasy quest. They go through the mines. They get to the river. There's the epic fight with Boromir and the orcs, and Boromir sacrificing his life. That was one of the most unforgettable moments in a movie I've ever experienced. Like that moment, because I have actually not read the full Lord of the Rings books. I've read The Hobbit, but I have not read the full Lord of the Rings book. So I'm kind of a normie, honestly, where Lord of the Rings is concerned. But I had a friend who had read them all 50 times, and he was kind of my lore guy sitting next to me in the theater. So I actually knew a lot about the actual lore because of my friend who had read them 50 times, and he loved all of the audiobooks and everything with Ian Holm and all of that. So I had actually heard a lot about the actual lore of Lord of the Rings before seeing the movie from my friend who loved it. And so when I'm watching that movie, he did not tell me about this piece of the lore about what was the fate of Boromir. So I kind of thought when I was watching it that it was going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt that it wouldn't conform to more modern standards of the hero's journey. I thought it would be a little bit of an old school kind of more like Troy, more like a Homeric tale of tragedy, of like Achilles at Troy kind of. That's probably a bad example because that is a tragedy, but you know what I mean, where it's not told in the classic Luke Skywalker hero's journey arc that you expect. I kind of expected that. And then that scene where Boromir redeems himself and sacrifices life, I mean, it was beautiful. It was incredible. He's like one of my favorite characters. He was my favorite character in that movie, honestly, because he was flawed. He was trying to do the right thing. So that's why Fellowship of the Ring is my favorite movie. But unfortunately, The Two Towers is my favorite movie. Why? Because, oh my God, Éowyn all day long, but also just the moment that movie begins and you're going into the mountains and you're hearing Gandalf's voice, I had chills. I was like, oh, I'm in for something here. And then you get to the Rohan. Rohan is my favorite faction. Rohan is my favorite faction in the games. In video games, I wanted to play as Rohan because they're amazing. The Horse Lords. Carl Urban's character is just incredible. He's so good in that movie. And then King Theoden. King Theoden is amazing. And then then you get to the Battle of Helm's Deep, which is one of the most magnificent movie battles ever. I mean, ever. Tell me, the opening battle in Gladiator can't even beat that scene. It's nothing. It's not even close. And then the way that Gandalf comes in and... Sorry, spoilers for Lord of the Rings, 20-year-old movie, just warning you here. The way Gandalf comes in at the end and saves them, and the music, Howard Shore's score, chills. I still get chills watching it, and I've seen it 10 times. So that is why The Two Towers is my favorite movie. But unfortunately, The Return of the King is my favorite movie. And the reason why Return of the King is my favorite film of all time is because Aragorn is like he returns. He's the king. No, but Minas Tirith, the battle. Okay, Faramir actually is probably my favorite character in the third film. No, Sam is my favorite character in the third film because Sam, oh my God, when he's carrying Frodo up Mount Doom, tell me if there can be a single dry eye in the house during that scene. Seriously, how can a grown man not cry when, that scene happens? It's just so amazing. It's like, I can't carry it for you, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry you. Oh my God, I just get chills thinking about it. It's so good. So good. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't give you a single Lord of the Rings film that's my favorite because they are all just incredible. And if I had to do it in a technical way, if I had to say which one is technically, in terms of execution, the best film, I still couldn't, because I'd say that Fellowship and Two Towers are equal. Return of the King would lose by a nose because of the Deus Ex Machina of the ghosts. I thought the ghosts were terrible. It basically gave Aragorn the power to have an invincible army that would beat Sauron for 1,000 years if he just chose not to let him go. And they basically are invincible. There's no way to kill him. So when they clean out all the orcs, it's, oh, well, that was nice. That was handy. Gimli even says it. Gimli even says it in the movie. He's like, oh, best not to let these blokes go. They're pretty useful in a tight spot. It's like, well, duh. They're invincible. Super awesome. Very handy. So no, I hated the ghosts. Ghosts were terrible. And I know that the book, it was different. In the book, it was like he recruited these pirates on the river. He used the ghosts to scare the pirates and like take their fleet. Lord of the Rings guys, let me know. But like that was kind of, and I thought that's already a better story. Like my mangled paraphrasing explanation of it is already a better story than Invincible Ghosts Save Day. Okay, that was a long answer to that. Let's see. I'm trying to find where I was. Love GC, CJ, if it's fine. I enjoyed the stream. Catch you next time. Thanks, Waffle. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. I should probably wrap this up soon. I've been going a while, but you guys are the chat's starting to happen, so I'm having fun now. I've always been having fun, but let's see. Polosurf says, perhaps you're not as satisfied with your channel, but what do you actually want to work on? Well, no, I don't mean to give you the wrong impression. I'm having so much fun with doing this, and it's hard work. It's hard work, not the actual work, because I do enjoy the work of it. It's just mentally, I think it's challenging because any creative pursuit, you will face resistance. And if you don't know, there's a great book, The War of Art. You'll hear me say it a lot, by Stephen Pressfield. He says, any creative endeavor, starting a new business, you face resistance, and resistance is basically a one-size-fits-all term for doubt, fear, judgment, laziness, excuses. I should be doing something else. I'll never be as good as Gary Beekler. Why even try? Who's ever going to have as many subs as the Critical Drinker? And, that's resistance, right? And so you face that, but that's the beauty of having a professional mindset is when you have a professional mindset, you show up to work even when you don't feel like it. And, but what happens when you show up when you don't feel like it is you actually wind up doing good work. And if it's work that's meaningful to you, which this is very meaningful to me, it took me a long time to discover what I wanted to do on YouTube. It took me a long time. And thank you, Fellowship, because you are actually, that was the journey I had to go on to find what spoke to me. And this subject matter speaks to me. So it's very rewarding, I think, actually, now that I'm doing it. But you have to have a professional mindset, which is, so anyway, very satisfied with the channel. I love it. How can we help you accomplish it? My goal. Just help me get the momentum on subs. Because my goal here, I don't know if any of you are going to the meetup, the Friday Night Tights meetup in April. My goal is to get there and start meeting you and meeting the F&T crew and just meeting more of the fellowship. And my plan is, I don't know how much I should say. I am working on an Iron Age story, which is a science fiction, Star Trek style space opera. And my plan is to kind of build it similar to the way that like Eric July did ISOM and kind of build a pre-order campaign eventually. But there's a lot of work that has to be done before that's possible. So my goal is to build the channel, and then the channel is meant to be entertaining in and of itself. The channel is meant to be a fun community. So to answer your question, how can you help me build it? You're doing it. Like being here is so awesome, and I so appreciate it. And just keep sharing it. Share the channel, share the videos, and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Help people find out about it. And also, be honest. I know that I'm new at this and my videos are probably need work. And there's things I want to get that quality up there. I want to get better at this. So I know that I've got a learning curve. So, I'm fine with whatever is earned is what I will accept. And so to the extent that I am earning people's time, that's incredibly meaningful to me. And that is also a lesson I learned the hard way. It might sound funny to you, but like, as much as I hate the behavior of an Alex Kurtzman, I don't hate the individual because I think hating people is a bad thing. But I do hate the behavior, and I hate the narcissism of those types of professionals, but I also kind of understand it because, there's a temptation to feel entitled, I think, to, you spend hours and hours and hours with these characters. I'm probably giving them too much credit because do they even think of it this way? But I worked on my novels for countless hours alone in a room, sacrifice. And it's not like it was some terrible sacrifice, but my point is like, it's a lonely thing to write a book. And it's not always lonely once you're in it because you're with your characters. But at first it can be, it's tough to like get over that resistance and do it. And then your characters become very meaningful to you. And you want the world to see them. It's like you want the world to experience it and to share in your joy. And there's a temptation to start to think you're entitled to that. And you're just not. You're just not. And so anyway, that's what I have to say about that. So just keep doing the work is the point. And that's my goal, is to keep doing the work and earn an audience for this channel and earn an audience for those characters and just keep it expanding and give a voice. No, I don't want to sound like I'm some. I'm so grateful for this Oscar, and I just want to give a voice to all the marginal. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, though, I think one of the things that I was in a dark place when I found Friday Night Tights, and I found it all through Critical Drinker. What a weird rabbit hole that was when you think about it. But like, I would see live streams. And I'd hear something else that someone else I'd never heard was saying. Like when I first heard Mahler dissecting a story, it pissed me off because it was a story I liked and he was right. I was like, oh my God, he's exactly right. He's figured out every flaw in this story that I couldn't see. And of course I'm a writer, so that scares me a little because I'm like, oh shit, am I a hack? I didn't even see that. But actually now I find it's just super cool. And so of course I subscribed to his channel. So then I found all these other channels, right? And I suddenly realized that like there's other people out there who feel what I'm feeling and they think what I'm thinking. And it's, I'm into, look, I hate politics, but I also obsess over it a little bit. I have a lot of political beliefs, but only because I just want to live free, man. I just want to be left alone. I want to live in a society that loves itself. Like, I want to live in a society where people like each other, people are generally safe and they can live their lives and they're not, being forced to do things against their will. Like that's just kind of what I want. And so to that extent, I think about politics a lot, but it's nice to be in a world that's not about that, right? I want to get the hell out of that. Like, it's a fact of life. You just can't avoid it. And, but this is my passion, is stories. My passion is stories. And so finding the F&T ecosystem has been amazing because it's like, these are people who love stories, but also are not yelling at me for not liking the woke shit, and that's really what it comes down to, is like, they also invite me to disagree with them, which I appreciate. This is why the woke are starting to destroy themselves. Much like the ring in the Lord of the Rings, evil has a way of undoing itself. And wokeness is, I'm not talking about the people themselves necessarily, but the behavior of wokeness is evil. It is very evil. And it is self-destructive in the extreme because it's negativity is what it is. It's looking around at the world and all you see is negativity. And that is a recipe for freaking misery. And so they're kind of destroying themselves because you notice how they can't take a joke they can't take a joke. The left used to be great. And if there's anyone who considers themselves on the left in the audience, you are welcome here. Do not misunderstand. I'm just saying that like, it used to be kind of a left-wing thing that like The Daily Show was great. Like they owned all the comedy, I'm a libertarian if you must know, but, but anyway, they owned all the comedy and the pop culture and they were funny because they could actually, and I loved, like, for example, the Colbert Report was like hilarious. That show was great when he was really funny and he played this character. And yes, I knew it was kind of making fun of, my team, but I didn't care because it was still pretty funny. Now they can't take a joke. Do you notice that? Like they can't, Jon Stewart, can he take a joke anymore? Like he can't. So yeah, being negative is a recipe for hating life. And you see that in their storytelling. So, and it's making people who would otherwise agree with them that like, oh yeah, there's injustice in the world and we should do something about it. And we should have we should hire actors who aren't always one one kind of group. It's like, in principle, that's a lofty goal, but because they've turned it into such a hostile thing that like now they're pushing people away who would have otherwise agreed with them, and it's destroying their own movement, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. Polo Surf says, writing is phenomenal. Do you have any published works? I do, sir. I'm going to briefly switch to my overlay. Again, if I misgender anyone in the chat, forgive me. I'm just reading your username, so sometimes, but don't cancel me. Let's see. Here we go. That is my book, sir. Blood and Oak. It is available now in Kindle, paperback, and audiobook on Amazon. And I am, by the way, looking for ways to no longer be dependent on Amazon. So that is one. But for now, Amazon is the best way I can fulfill my product. So I have 2 books. The first one is Blood and Oak. The second one is Blood and Oak, Wolves Will Eat. They are effectively season 1 of my Swords and Sails adventure story. So it's a classic high seas, kind of like, if you've ever seen the Jack Out, like Master and Commander, they're kind of that type of a story. So the first 2 books tell one complete narrative and leave possibilities for another story. And I'm working on this as well. So I have this one and a sci-fi one I'm working on. So check that out if you are so inclined. And all I ask, well, that's all I ask. If you check it out, if you like it, I appreciate it. And it's not for me. It's for my characters. They need some love. That's all I'm saying. It's how every writer feels. Do you write, sing, dance, act, direct? Sing? No. Do you want to hear singing? Polo surf? I don't think you want to hear that. Dance? I have been known to cut a little rug in my time. Once in a while. Wait, is this a veiled way of saying dance monkey? No, I'm just kidding. This is one of the weird things. When I was a little kid, I danced all the time. I was a very exuberant, outgoing, extroverted kid. And without sounding like, my life has not been some giant tragedy. So I'm not trying to tell you a sob story here. But I took hits for it. It's like when you stand out in a crowd, you take hits. It's just the way it goes. And I just learned my lesson. I learned it was not good to just dance when you feel like it. It's just not a good thing. You don't want that attention. And so I stopped doing all of that. And, but I've sort of rediscovered it a little bit in recent life. This is a weird conversation. I'm going to move away from this. Yes, I sometimes dance in clubs. Act, direct. Act, no. I once had ideas about acting. I don't know if I would be a good actor. My friends tell me I can sort of do voices a little bit. I don't think I'm very good at it, but they seem to think I have some talent at that. Look, I don't even actually think I ever set out to be a writer exactly. It was more that I had these stories in my head, and it was like, how do I get these stories into reality? That was what I wanted. And I read novels at the time. When I was younger, I read a lot of novels, especially fantasy novels, and kind of obscure ones. I didn't ever read like the really popular ones like Game of Thrones or Wheel of Time, but I admired what those writers were able to do. I admired that they were able to create this story. And of course, anyone can write a book in theory. All you need is a pen and paper, or in modern times, a keyboard and a computer. That's the most effective way to make a story reality for someone who has no resources. And so that was where I started, was like, okay, and I liked the craft of it. And so I set out to learn how to replicate that. And it was purely an ends. It was really just an ends. I didn't set out to write for writing's sake. I hate journaling. Like, I'm just not that kind of person. It's like, I want to create an experience. How do I create that experience? So to answer your question, if I have to write, sing, dance, act, direct, produce, run a business, anything I have to do to deliver that experience is what I will do. I will do whatever is in my power to do to deliver the experience that is in my head, which is an incredibly epic movie that's like emotional and moving with characters you care about and you love who go on an adventure that inspires you. That is, I love that experience when I have it in theaters, and that is what I want for my audience. And so whatever skill I had to learn how to edit to do this channel because that is what the audience requires. And I have more work to do on that score. And so yeah, that's kind of the answer to that. I will do what is necessary. Waffle says, I'm here because of FNT. Well, thank you, Waffle. I appreciate that. It really does mean a lot to me. And I know you're taking a risk, a new creator. Your time is valuable. You've got a lot of YouTube videos you could watch. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't take that for granted. So, see, writing. I think I read that one. Let's see here. I know what you Fuman Blue says, I know what you mean. I try not to hate anyone as it's a reflection on me, not them. Totally agree. If you're even people that in your view deserve it, like you think of the worst criminals who've done heinous things, you kind of feel as a human entitled to hate them. And I certainly am tempted. Certainly I'm tempted to hate people that have done truly despicable things. And it's like, and I can't tell you that I don't a little bit, right? Because I'm human. And but I endeavor to be a human who recognizes that evil does exist. I believe in that. Like, I'm not a moral relativist. There is good and there is evil. But hating other humans is self-defeating and does not actually, I think, defeat evil. I don't think you can defeat hate with hate. I don't think you can. And so that's how I feel about that. Gary is how I found FNT. Yeah, I mean, well, Gary, yeah, how did I find FNT now that I think about it? Because I was Critical Drinker, and then Critical Drinker had Gary on his stream. And how did I don't remember how I actually got there. I think what I was doing, you know what it was? I think I found Gary, some of his videos, and he was talking about Star Trek Picard. I know I caught a couple of those, and I really liked his Picard reviews because I hated Picard, and Gary just tears Picard to pieces, and I love it. And I think I just stumbled upon Friday Night Tights one time, and I swear to God, it's what I said in that first super chat. I really thought this video is 7 hours. This video says 7 hours long. What? Because I didn't understand YouTube very well. I was kind of new to YouTube a year ago. I really was. I kind of understood. I didn't watch it very often. But like TV was so bad, I had nothing else to watch. So I just started watching videos because it was a replacement for like every show is garbage now. And so I just couldn't. But I actually found I really enjoyed it because it wasn't politics. I liked that it was not political stuff. There were, it was entertainment, comic book, nerd stuff. And but then I actually started watching the stream, and it's just too much fun. I don't know what to say. It became fun, and I started listening to it, and now I freaking love it. I love live streams. If I could, I would watch live streams all day if I could. There's at least 10 people whose live streams I don't get to watch enough of. So, which again, you're spending your time with me, and that's awesome. That is a huge compliment. So I thank you for that. Come on, man. You're in no way far from an Oscar. Mahler is sharp as hell, Fu Man Blue says. Agreed. That guy is the surgeon. The surgeon, man. There is no one. I mean this. Look, my dream would be to have Mahler be my editor. Like if I had my next book, if Mahler had the time and I had the wherewithal to pay him what he deserves and he could just do an edit for me, I would follow that edit and I'd be like, this book's ironclad. You can't find a flaw. You can't. Mahler edited this. There's no flaws. The guy just has a mind like unbelievable. And you know what? He gets all of these YouTubers like Critical Drinker, Mahler, Gary, they get so much shit for all they're doing is dissecting the plot of a story. That's all they're doing. It's amazing the shit they get for that. It's like, how is that controversial? All they're saying is that, and look, I told you the first time Mahler was critiquing something, he was critiquing something I liked, and I felt, and it kind of pissed me off a little, not at him, but I felt like, no, I don't agree with you. But then I thought about it, I'm like, no, you're right. That's right. That plot did not make any sense. He pointed one out in The Mandalorian that I missed, which was What was the one he pointed out? I think it was the thing about the robot. Like, what reason did he have to have any expectation whatsoever that that robot would be on his side anyway? So yeah, definitely. Yeah, they get called an echo chamber. Honestly, the F&T crew, the Friday Night Tides crew, they get called an echo chamber and kind of the YouTube space. And I'm always afraid a little bit. Afraid's probably not the right word, but for lack of a better term, I worry about myself getting drawn into echo chambers because I like to think I'm a free thinker. But as I mentioned earlier, all humans are vulnerable to mind viruses, and there are many kinds of mind viruses. And so, see cults, for examples. But that being said, I think having some awareness. But I've watched a lot of these shows, and like the arguments they get into are just of epic quality. See, what they agree on is they agree on not forcing your opinion on other people. That's why if they're an echo chamber, it is on that point. And I'm okay with being in an echo chamber on that point. I'm okay with that. I don't believe in forcing other people to have the right thoughts. I don't believe in thought police. I can't imagine a worse hell on earth than not being able to own your own thoughts and your own speech. Not having ownership. It's one thing to not own your labor. That's slavery. But to not own your own speech, that's worse than slavery. That's, okay. Let me pause there. I'm not saying not having free speech. Well, that is slavery. Because, like, if you're not free to speak, you're also not free. You just aren't. So, obviously, slaves would not have free speech, of course. So, they go hand in hand. It's like if you can't own your own thoughts, like, even if you're in a terrible, like, if you're a prisoner, let's say, you're a prisoner in a gulag, you do not have freedom. And if you're put to manual labor in a gulag, let's say, you are now a slave as well. And the only freedom you have is in your attitude and in your thoughts. Carl Sagan wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a concentration camp survivor. And he points out that, like, in the horror that he had to live through, that was the only freedom he had left, was his own attitude, to choose his attitude towards his own captors. And I think that that is what suppressing free speech is seeking to take away from people. And you can't totally do it. It's like that line in Shawshank Redemption, Andy Dufresne, he plays the music and he's like, that they can't take that from us, meaning the prisoner, the prison warden, he can't take that from the prisoners. The music is something you can have within you. And I like that line. So you can shut people up, but you can't keep them from being people until we get Neuralink. But that's another story. Booman Blue says, yeah, I want to see that the best actors casting can find, not the best colored person they can find. Well, and here's the thing. It's like, I've always been uncomfortable with this debate because on the one hand, I do believe in a colorblind society. I believe in that. Like, I think that there's one race, and that's humanity. One humanity. That is my race. And I realize just for saying that, I'm probably a bigot. But really, I think that is simply just an awareness. I don't think that has to be a belief. That's just an awareness, in my view, of the nature of what we are. We are part of a species. Like Star Trek. When I was a kid, what Star Trek was presenting to me was obvious, right? It wasn't something I had to be taught. It was obvious to me. In Star Trek, it's a colorblind society. I'm talking about original Trek. I'm not talking about Kurtzman Trek. In the original Trek, the fact that Benjamin Sisko is the captain, the commander, and then later the captain of DS9, he's just the captain. That's what he is. His race is immaterial. I never once thought about Geordi's race when I was watching Next Gen when I was a kid. It never even occurred to me. It was just Geordi is the guy in engineering fixing things. That's who he is. And then that, by extension, applied to all the aliens that they encounter, because the aliens are different species, and yet the attitude of the Federation that all sapient species are created equal, which is a distinctly foundational idea in America, obviously, the idea that all sapient species are created equal was also self-evident to me. It was like, yes, we as humans do not have the right to treat aliens, you know, as a slave race, or to abuse them, or to think less of them because they're not human. And if we are technologically superior to one of the aliens races, we have a responsibility to be ethical in our dealings with them. At the Prime Directive, we don't poison other societies because we think our way is better, right? So that is what bothers me about this whole debate, is that we shouldn't even be having it, because it's self-evident that humanity should not be concerned with the color of our skin. It is the woke that are recreating the segregation era. They're recreating it. It was gone. It was solved. Think about that. Think about that. Thousands of years of human ethno-tribalism, and we solved it. Like, now I know there's people who would disagree with me, and that's fine. But you get what I'm saying. Like, we abolished the law, the legal practice of discrimination against other people based on their race. We abolished it. How many societies can actually say they did something like that? To me, that's an incredible human achievement. Not many societies undertake to correct such a terrible moral wrong. And it's amazing to me how the woke don't see that. They don't see that, like, that's a miracle. That, like, it's human nature is to be tribalistic. Human nature is to treat people differently based on grouping them. And it is a huge achievement to undertake to change that behavior. And it's amazing how the woke are recreating it in the name of correcting injustice. They're saying we need to actually have, this dorm is for that group and this dorm is for that group. And it's like, you realize what you're doing, right? You're sort of backwards reverse engineering the very thing we abolished. So I don't know. That's what they... Fu Man Blue says, haha, dance monkey. I'm like, no, I have my dignity. People tend to need a reason for any happy person they find. LOL, like what we were saying before. Yeah, like people need a reason to be happy. Like, what are you so happy about? Polo Surf says, I'm back. Perhaps evil can defeat evil via mass genocide. That's what they think, right? They think, by the way, okay. And again, Swords and Starships is politically agnostic. Everyone is welcome here. So I will express occasionally my views, but do not take that to mean that you are not welcome if you don't agree with me. But, this is one of the things that bothers me about kind of some of the right language lately has been the word demonic. People have been using this word demonic for like bad woke behavior. And while I agree with in principle what they're saying, that like, yes, this is evil behavior. This is evil behavior, and we can't allow it. Like, we can't not resist it. But I get, it just bothers me to start actually, because to me, that's kind of the same game they're playing. Is like they begin to dehumanize their enemy. And that is that's a danger in human thinking. Once you start dehumanizing your enemy, even in World War II, right? The Allies had every reason to despise the German people, right? And no doubt that both sides committed a certain level of atrocities. We both know that where the balance of atrocities lies. Don't get me wrong here. But like, it's war. War, everybody does bad things. It's just a fact. But I do think there was still an ethic on the side of the Allies that like there's a proper way to treat prisoners. It's like there's regardless of what individual soldiers may have done that was not authorized, even the leaders of Germany in World War II were entitled to a trial in the eyes of the world. So that to me is a demonstration that even people you may think are irredeemable on some level are still entitled to human treatment. I'm probably getting too in the weeds there, but that's just my point. It's like, You do have to fight a little fire with fire sometimes. I'm not saying you never fight fire with fire. I'm just, because we had to fight the Germans with fire, that's for sure. The WW2 Germans, not modern Germans, of course. Let's see here. Fuban Blue. He's only like 28 years old too. Talk about Mahler, I think. Yeah, he's only 28. I actually don't know. He sounds young, but yeah, I don't know much about. I had no idea. You're talking about Viktor Frankl. Okay, yeah, I had no idea he was in a camp. Is that maybe who you're talking about, Viktor Frankl? All right, cool. Well, that's all the comments I got. So, all right, everybody. All half dozen of you. No, I'm just kidding. Listen, I'm grateful. Everybody who showed up in the chat, I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to wrap this one up. This is my first ever live stream, and we got through it together. So, born in 93, he said. Yeah, so Mahler's sharp as a tack, that guy. Super sharp. I just love his breakdowns of things. Definitely critical drinker too, man. He's and I've been reading his book too, his first book, and that is he's military thrillers are kind of not my thing. Modern military thrillers are kind of not my thing, and that's sort of what he writes. But it's written well. It's very well written. Yeah, thanks, Fu Man Blue. I appreciate it. Thanks, Polar Surf, Tom, everybody else. Who else? Waffle was in here. Waffle's gone, but I appreciate you guys helping me out, sitting with me for a couple hours on a Saturday, and hopefully we can grow this thing and we can get it popping. So, all right. Well, that is the first ever Captain's Cast, and this is Swords and Starships. I am Captain Garrett, and I say to you, I will see you out there.